Of course I can't deny a request from you, Your Highness, but the problem is that Violet Spirit currently isn't in the Black River Water Palace, so I can't call on her even if I wanted to, Lady Ju replied as her brows furrowed slightly. Where is she? Han Li immediately asked. Our Black River Water Palace is home to many cultivators, and that slut was granted special privileges by my husband, allowing her to enter and exit the water palace as she pleases. So how am I supposed to know where she's gone? Lady Ju snapped in a cold voice. Lady Ju's scathing words and haughty attitude were really beginning to get on Han Li's nerves, and he said, "You just said that you were assigned with the task of overseeing the Black River Water Palace's affairs during Senior Black River's seclusion, so surely you at least have some idea of where Violet Spirit has gone. Who the hell do you think you are? I only allowed an Immortal Realm scoundrel like you into our Black River Water Palace because you're accompanying His Highness, yet you dare to interrogate me now. Our Black River Water Palace doesn't welcome uncivilized guests like you." Lady Ju abruptly flared up with rage and swept both sleeves through the air she spoke. Two bursts of black light immediately erupted out of the walls on either side of the hall, then swept up Han Li in a flash before forming a black vortex, attempting to teleport him out of the palace. Han Li's brows furrowed slightly upon seeing this, and his mantra-treasured axis instantly appeared behind him before revolving rapidly on the spot, releasing countless golden ripples that encompassed the black vortex, which fell completely still. Lady Ju's expression changed slightly upon seeing this, and she made a rapid string of hand seals to try and spur the black vortex back into action, but to no avail. "Lady Ju, I have no intention of opposing you. All I want to know is Violet Spirit's whereabouts, and I'm willing to compensate you handsomely for this information," Han Li said as he cupped his fist in a salute. "Insolent scoundrel, do you really think I'm powerless to do anything to you? Come to me, Black River Water Palace." Lady Ju yelled as she continued to make more hand seals, and the entire Black River Water Palace began to tremble. Countless rays of black light converged from all directions, forming a miniature Black River Water Palace projection that was several feet in size over the palm of her hand. Han Li's pupils contracted slightly upon seeing this, and before he had a chance to do anything, Lady Ju thrust both palms forward, sending the Black River Water Palace projection flying into the golden ripples around Han Li. The golden ripples were instantly torn apart without being able to pose any resistance, and as a result, the black vortex was restored to its normal state, instantly devouring Han Li like a giant black mouth. In the next instant, Han Li found himself outside the Black River Water Palace. Only a small portion of the time Tao runes on his mantra-treasured axis had recovered, so its powers were greatly diminished. However, for Violet Spirit's sake, there was no way that he could back down. He took a deep breath, then activated his infernal devilish eyes to inspect the restrictions on the black light barrier before him, and at the same time, his mantra-treasured axis released a wave of golden ripples that descended upon the light barrier. Right at this moment, a familiar voice suddenly rang out from beside him. "I knew I'd find you here, fellow Taoist Li." Han Li hurriedly swung around to discover Shi Pakong standing not far away. "What are you doing here, Your Highness?" Han Li asked in a surprised voice as he stopped what he was doing. A faint smile appeared on Shi Pakong's face, and he was just about to respond when a black vortex suddenly took shape nearby amid a burst of spatial fluctuations. The black vortex only lingered for a moment before fading away to reveal Shi Chuankong, and it seemed that he had also been thrown out by Lady Ju. "Pakong, what are you doing here?" Shi Chuankong asked with a surprised expression. "I heard that the two of you left Night Sun City for the Blackwater region, so I knew that you had to have come for Celestial Maiden Violet Spirit. Even now, the matter concerning fellow Taoist Weeping Soul hasn't been resolved, and that's constantly been weighing on my mind. So to make up for that, I wanted to do whatever I could to help fellow Taoist Li save Violet's spirit, Shi Pakong replied with an apologetic expression. You can count on Pakong, fellow Taoist Li. He'll definitely be able to save fellow Taoist Violet's spirit, Shi Chuankong said with an ecstatic expression. Thank you, Your Highness, Han Li said as he cupped his fist in a grateful salute. What's the situation like now? It looks like things haven't gone very smoothly for the two of you, Shi Pakong remarked. A wry smile appeared on Han Li's face as he gave Shi Pakong a recount of what had happened in the Black River Water Palace. Lady Ju is Taoist Master Black River's Tao partner, but while she possesses quite a lofty cultivation base, she's also a very petty woman, so she must have been very jealous of fellow Taoist Violet Spirit. You're a friend of fellow Taoist Violet Spirit, so her resentment must have extended to you as well, Shi Pakong mused after hearing Han Li's recount. I figured that was the case. I'm going to make her tell me Violet Spirit's whereabouts whether she likes it or not, even if I have to do it by force, Han Li said as a cold look flashed through his eyes. Violet Spirit wasn't his Tao partner, but in his heart, he was just as important as Nangong Wan, and there was no way that he could simply back down, knowing full well that she was potentially in a state of peril. Shi Pakong hurriedly stopped him as he said, I can understand that you urgently wish to save your friend, but resolving this matter by force is not a wise option. Taoist Master Black River is a great encompassment cultivator, and even though he's in seclusion right now, you'll be in a lot of trouble if he comes after you after emerging from seclusion. I know this isn't a wise option, but I have no other choice, Han Li replied with furrowed brows. If you trust me, then leave this matter to me. Taoist Master Black River and I are allies at the moment, so Lady Ju can't just kick me out as she pleases, and perhaps I'll be able to get some information out of her, Shi Pakong said. Pakong's right, fellow Taoist Li. Let him go first, and if that doesn't work, then we'll think of something else, Shi Chuankong chimed in. All right, in that case, I'll be counting on you, Your Highness, Han Li replied as he cupped his fist in a salute. Get back a little, Shi Pakong said to Han Li and Shi Chuankong, and the two of them exchanged a glance before flying back into the distance, following which Shi Pakong began to approach the Black River Water Palace. Han Li activated his infernal devilish eyes to observe the Black River Water Palace from afar, while Shi Pakong summoned a blue talisman before sending it flying into the black light barrier. Moments later, an opening appeared on the black light barrier, and Shi Pakong immediately flew inside. You can rest assured now, fellow Taoist Li. Pakong will definitely be able to find out fellow Taoist Violet Spirit's whereabouts for you, Shi Chuankong assured with a confident smile. I certainly hope so, Han Li sighed. Close to 2 hours flew by in a flash. Han Li was still relatively calm and collected, but Shi Chuankong was beginning to grow a little uneasy, and he opened his mouth on multiple occasions to say something, but didn't know what to say. Right at this moment, an opening reappeared on the black light barrier, and Shi Pakong flew out from within. Han Li and Shi Chuankong immediately approached him before the former asked, How did it go, Your Highness? I was able to find out fellow Taoist Violet Spirit's current whereabouts, as well as some information about the time that she spent in the Black River Water Palace, Shi Pakong replied with a faint smile, and Han Li was ecstatic to hear this. I knew we could count on you, Pakong, Shi Chuankong said with a wide smile. Thank you, Your Highness. How has Violet Spirit been faring after coming to the Black River Water Palace? Han Li asked. After she ascended to the Holy Realm, fellow Taoist Violet Spirit caught Taoist Master Black River's eye for her looks and her aptitude, and he wanted to make her his concubine, but she desperately refused, threatening to take her own life. Taoist Master Black River didn't want to subdue her by force, and he was also in a hurry to go into seclusion at the time, so he could only leave fellow Taoist Violet Spirit under the supervision of Lady Ju, Shi Pakong replied. Han Li was quite relieved to hear this, and Shi Chuankong slapped him firmly on the shoulder as he exulted. That's great. Fellow Taoist Violet Spirit's purity still remains, so you can rest assured now, fellow Taoist Li. What are you saying, Chuankong? Shi Pakong scolded with a stern glare. Only then did Shi Chuankong realize that he had misspoken, and he scratched his own head with an awkward look on his face. Han Li remained completely unflustered as he said, Violet Spirit is all on her own, so even if something had happened, it wouldn't be her fault. What happened after that? Is Violet Spirit still in the Black River Water Palace? After Taoist Master Black River went into seclusion, fellow Taoist Violet Spirit attempted to escape from the Black River Water Palace, and not only did Lady Ju not stop her, she intentionally let her go, so she's not in the Black River Water Palace right now, Shi Pakong sighed. That's good news, is it not? The Holy Realm is a big place, but it won't be difficult for us to track someone down. Once we get back, I'll make some arrangements and... Shi Chuankong's voice gradually trailed off as he spoke, and he seemed to have realized that something wasn't quite right. Han Li's brows were also tightly furrowed in concern. It made sense for Lady Ju to intentionally allow Violet Spirit to escape from the Black River Water Palace, and even if Taoist Master Black River were to ask her about the matter after coming out of seclusion, he wouldn't be able to blame her. However, given how petty she was, there was no way that she would simply allow Violet Spirit to leave. Shi Pakong took a glance at Han Li, then confirmed his suspicions as he said, not long after fellow Taoist Violet Spirit left the Black River Water Palace, Lady Ju sent people to capture her before exiling her into the Sculpture spatial domain. Han Li's pupils contracted slightly upon hearing this, while Shi Chuankong hesitated momentarily before remarking, the Sculpture spatial domain is not a safe place, and fellow Taoist Violet Spirit only recently ascends, so she's most likely still only at the true immortal stage. Aside from his Tao partner in Lady Ju, Taoist Master Black River also has around a dozen concubines, and there's been constantly infighting among them over the years. So the fact that fellow Taoist Violet Spirit has been able to remain safe here for so many years indicates that she's a very smart woman. On top of that, I'm assuming Taoist Master Black River must have given her a few powerful devilish treasures for her protection. So even if she's been cast into exile in the Sculpture spatial domain, she should be able to keep herself safe, Shi Pakong said. I certainly hope that's the case. I must thank you again, Your Highness. It's very impressive that you were able to uncover so much information in such a short time. You've put me to shame in this regard, Han Li sighed. I agree. How did you manage to get all of this information out of that petty wench? Shi Chuankong asked with a curious expression. I've been dealing with Lady Ju for many years, so I know her very well. Before I went in, I already had a rough idea of how she would have treated fellow Taoist Violet Spirit, and it wasn't difficult to find out all of this by asking some leading questions. Shi Pakong replied calmly, as if he had just done something very simple. It may not have been difficult for you, but it was an impossible task for the two of us, Han Li said with a hint of admiration in his eyes. It's really not that impressive, Shi Pakong chuckled in a modest fashion. What do you plan to do from here, fellow Taoist Li? This isn't the place to be talking, so let's leave this place first, Han Li replied. Half a month later, in a courtyard in the city lord's manor of Black River City, there was a round ebony table in an elegant and refined hall, atop which sat a red clay stove with a fire burning inside. Large amounts of steam were surging out of the purple clay teapot on top of the stove, causing the teapot's lid to clatter incessantly. At this moment, Shi Pakong was standing beside the table, and he lifted the teapot before pouring some of its contents into another teapot to wash the tea leaves inside. then poured the water away before replacing it with some new water. Only after that did he pour the tea out into 3 intricate teacups on the table, before pushing 2 of them toward Shi Chuankong and Han Li, who were also seated at the table. Fellow Taoist Li, perhaps you're still unaware of just how perilous the Sculpture spatial domain is. Are you sure you want to go in? Shi Pakong asked. There's no point in trying to dissuade him, Pakong. Fellow Taoist violet spirit is extremely important to Brother Li, and if it were possible to dissuade him, I would have already done so, Shi Chuankong said with a smile. In that case, I won't speak any further on this matter. What are your plans then? When are you going to travel to the heavenly rainbow region? Shi Pakong asked as he turned to Shi Chuankong. An awkward smile appeared on Shi Chuankong's face as he replied, As you're aware, Brother Li has done a lot for me, so I plan to accompany him on this trip to the Sculpture spatial domain. Hence, I'll have to trouble you to look after the heavenly rainbow realm in my stead during my absence. That's ridiculous. Father granted you the heavenly rainbow region, not me. On top of that, I can't let you venture into such a dangerous place. Shi Pakong scolded with a stern expression. His Highness is right, Brother Shi. I can make the trip to the Sculpture spatial domain on my own, Han Li chimed in. A serious look appeared on Shi Chuankong's face as he protested. Pakong, you've always taught me to repay the kindness of others. Brother Li has saved my life on multiple occasions, so how can I abandon him in his time of need? The disapproval on Shi Pakong's face didn't wane in the slightest upon hearing this, but in the end, he could only heave a faint sigh. Fine, I knew I wouldn't be able to stop you. If I weren't so busy, I would come with you. The city will be fine even if I'm absent for 1,000,000 years, but it can't go even a single day without you, Pakong, Shi Chuankong said in an elated manner. All right, that's enough from you. I know some things about the Sculpture spatial domain, but I've never been there before myself, so I only have limited information to impart onto the 2 of you, Shi Pakong sighed. Please enlighten us, Your Highness, Han Li requested in an earnest manner. A few minutes later, Shi Pakong had divulged everything that he knew about the Sculpture spatial domain, following which he summoned a pair of items before handing one each to Shi Chuankong and Han Li. Han Li accepted the item handed to him to discover that it was a piece of beet hide with a rough map drawn on it, with some annotations littered throughout the map. This is a map of the Sculpture spatial domain that I was able to find from a set of unofficial historic records. It's unclear how old this map is, so it may or may not be able to help you, but take it with you anyway, Shi Pakong said. Han Li nodded in response, then examined the map briefly before stowing it away. As for Shi Chuankong, he was holding what appeared to be a pendant and he asked, What's this, Pakong? Han Li turned to discover that the pendant had been crafted into the form of an intricate cage, and there were numerous ferocious-looking beasts scratching at the cage from inside. Wear this on your body at all times and throw it out if you encounter some insurmountable peril. There's no need to inject any spiritual qi or devilish qi to activate it, and perhaps it could save your lives, Shi Pakong said in a serious manner. Shi Chuankong did as he was told and put on the pendant. Remember that in the Sculpture spatial domain, not only is there a complete absence of spiritual qi and devilish, you won't be able to access your storage tools either, so if you need something, you'll have to carry it on your body. And once you get in there, your physical bodies will be just about all that you can rely on, Shi Pakong cautioned. If the Sculpture spatial domain has already been sealed, then how can we return from it? Han Li asked. There's a special teleportation formation in the Black Water region that can teleport one straight out of the Sculpture spatial domain, but it hasn't been used for over 100,000 years, so it'll most likely take a lot of time and effort to restore. Having said that, I'll take care of it, so there's no need for you to be concerned. These 2 tokens will be vital for the teleportation formation to ascertain your locations, so make sure to keep them safe, Shipakong replied as he handed a pair of leaf-shaped jade tokens to Han Li and Shi Chuankong. How do we use these things? Shi Chuankong asked as he carefully examined his jade token. When you want to come back, just shed a drop of blood essence onto the token, and the formation on this side will be able to teleport you directly out of the Sculpture spatial domain. As for fellow Taoist Violet Spirit, as long as she's with fellow Taoist Li, they'll be able to teleport back together, Shipakong replied. All right, got it, Shi Chuankong replied with a nod. On top of that, I also have 2 blood-tied pills here that can temporarily stimulate the latent potential of your bodies. Of course, the after-effects from consuming the pill are quite severe, and you'll experience a period of feebleness, perhaps even complete immobility after the pill's effects wear off, so only use it as a last resort, Shipakong continued. There's no need to be so worried about us, Pakong. We can look after ourselves, Shi Chuankong said with a smile. How could I not be worried? That godforsaken place has been sealed for hundreds of thousands of years. In any case, that's all I have to say, the rest is up to you. Make sure you come back alive and well, Shipakong said as he patted Shi Chuankong on the shoulder. I will, Shi Chuankong replied with a smile, and a faint smile also appeared on Han Li's face at this show of brotherly affection. Shortly thereafter, Shipakong departed, and after taking a brief rest, Han Li and Sh Chuankong also left the Black Water region. Inside the Black Water region, there was a dark green mountain range that was dotted with brown sand hills that appeared very much out of place, and at this moment, Han Li and Shi Chuankong were hovering in the air above this mountain range. Even from close to 100 kilometers away, they were able to detect the strange spatial fluctuations coming from the area. Han Li activated his infernal devilish eyes, and he spotted a near-transparent hemispherical restriction that encompassed the entire area up ahead like a giant bowl, with all of the brown hills contained within. This must be the entrance to the Sculpture spatial domain, Han Li said. That's right. I recall that this place was sealed and declared a restricted area by Father a very long time ago, Shi Chuankong replied. That must be to prevent the people in exile from escaping, Han Li speculated. That's part of the reason, but I think he was more concerned about people from our holy realm inadvertently stumbling onto those sand hills before being sucked into the Sculpture spatial domain, Shi Chuankong replied. I see, Han Li mused with a nod. Let's go, Shi Chuankong said, and the 2 of them descended in front of a hall situated outside the sand hills. The guards stationed outside the building immediately stopped them in their tracks, and one of them declared, "This is a restricted area, turn back now." After Shi Chuankong revealed his identity, a golden immortal stationed in the hall immediately emerged to greet them. It was a short and stocky elderly man with some stripes all over his face, and he immediately extended a respectful bow toward Shi Chuankong as he greeted, "Su Fu pays his respects to His Highness." "No need for formalities, Elder Su," Shi Chuankong said. "What brings you here today, Your Highness?" Su Fu asked with a puzzled expression as he took a glance at Han Li. "We have some matters to attend to here today," Shi Chuankong replied. "In that case, please come in, and we'll talk inside," Su Fu said as he stepped to the side before making an inviting hand gesture. Shi Chuankong and Han Li exchanged a glance with each other, then entered the hall together. Upon learning that Han Li and Shi Chuankong intended to enter the Sculpture spatial domain, Su Fu immediately attempted to dissuade them in an alarmed manner. In response, Shi Chuankong pulled out an handwritten edict prepared by Shipakong, claiming that the 2 of them were carrying out an urgent mission that required them to enter the Sculpture spatial domain right away. "Your Highness, the Sculpture spatial domain has already been sealed for many years, and no one knows what things are like in there right now. As for the teleportation formation that you mentioned, that hasn't been used for a very long time, Su Fu said with tightly furrowed brows. The Balance Fall Duke has already made arrangements for us, so you can rest assured, Elder Su, Shi Chuankong replied with a dismissive wave. In that case, I won't try to dissuade you any further. Please come with me, Su Fu said, then led Han Li and Shi Chuankong to the rear hall. There was a back door in the rear hall that led to the sand hills outside, and it clearly served at the entrance to the spatial restriction. Once you go in there, just step onto the sand hills, and you'll automatically sink into the Sculpture spatial domain. Do keep in mind that this is a one-way entrance, so you can't exit from it, Su Fu cautioned in a solemn manner. We'll be sure to remember that, Han Li replied. Su Fu flipped a hand over to summon a black seal, which he pressed into a slot above the door frame, following which the restriction on the back door was opened at his behest. I wish you a safe and smooth journey, Your Highness, Su Fu said. Thank you for the well wishes, Shi Chuankong replied with a smile. After emerging from the hall, the two of them quickly made their way to the edge of the first hill before stopping in their tracks. Han Li examined the hill briefly, but wasn't able to detect anything abnormal from it. It wasn't giving off any spatial fluctuations, and it looked no different from a normal hill. Shi Chuankong flipped a hand over to produce a long black saber, which he strapped to his waist, and in response to Han Li's inquisitive gaze, he explained, "Seeing as we can't use any treasures, surely carrying a weapon will be better than going in empty-handed." Han Li offered no response as he swept a sleeve through the air to conjure up a door of silver light, from within which Taoist Zai emerged. Shi Pakong had told them that storage tools couldn't be accessed, and even though he hadn't made any mention of domain treasures, Han Li still decided that it would be best to release Taoist Zai in advance as a safety precaution. Shi Chuankong took a glance at the two sabers strapped to Taoist Zai's waist, and he was very pleased to see that someone had the same idea as him. After some contemplation, Han Li didn't summon any of his azure bamboo cloudswarm swords. Instead, he placed all of his storage tools into his domain treasure, and all that remained was the ring of time on his ring finger. With their preparations complete, the trio exchanged a glance with each other before jumping onto the hill in unison. As soon as the three of them landed on the hill, a burst of hazy silver light instantly emerged to sweep up the trio, following which they slowly sank downward before vanishing out of sight. How strange! No one has even come near this place for so many years yet recently. Su Fu's voice trailed off there as he watched the trio vanish with a thoughtful look on his face. Forget it. Who am I to be worrying myself with the affairs of the nobility? With that, he closed the restriction, then turned and made his way back to the front of the hall. Inside the Sculpture spatial domain was a deserted island, with plumes of smoke rising up everywhere. A giant lizard and a massive centipede were rushing at each other from two opposing ends of the island, before crashing into each other with tremendous force. The force of the clash immediately sent both of them flying backward, and the resulting shockwaves scattered all of the surrounding smoke. Both the lizard and the centipede were sent tumbling over the ground, but as soon as they steadied themselves, their eyes immediately met once again, and they were clearly preparing for a second clash. Right at this moment, the sound of blowing wind suddenly rang out from the ground right in between the two giant beasts, and a geyser of sand rose up from the ground, following which Han Li's trio emerged. The sand around the trio quickly dissipated, and the three of them were immediately struck by a sense of tremendous spatial pressure that was coming from all directions. Han Li could feel his own internal organs being compressed by some type of external force, and his limbs were also feeling quite heavy, but not enough to impact his movement. The most jarring change of all was that his immortal spiritual power circulation had instantly drawn to a grinding halt. However, before they even had a chance to examine their surroundings, the ground beneath them suddenly began to tremble violently as the two giant beasts came charging straight at them. "Look out!" Han Li yelled, and he swept a sleeve through the air, but nothing happened. Only then did he recall that it was impossible to use any treasures, law powers, or spirit domains in the Sculpture spatial domain. Despite this slight hiccup, he adapted very quickly, and all of his profound acupoints lit up as he threw a fist at the oncoming giant lizard. At the same time, Shi Chuankong gripped onto his black saber with both hands, then launched himself up into the air before swinging the saber down upon the black centipede. A resounding boom rang out as Han Li's fist struck the lizard's forehead, causing its head to cave in slightly, and it was sent flying back through the air before tumbling end over end along the ground. As for Han Li himself, he was also knocked by several steps from the force of the clash before steadying himself. He was quite surprised by this, as the giant lizard didn't appear to be all that different from the ones that he had seen in the immortal realm, but it possessed far superior power and physical prowess to any similar creature that he had encountered before. In the face of a punch thrown by Han Li after activating his great universe origin arts, a normal giant lizard would have had its head completely smashed open, yet this one remained largely unharmed, and that was nothing short of incredible. At the same time, a sharp clang rang out as Shi Chuankong's saber struck the giant centipede on the head, then slid all the way down its body, leaving a bright trail of sparks in its wake, but the saber only left a mark on its body and couldn't even slice through its scales. Pa Kong was telling us that the creatures in here are all vastly different from those in the outside world. I can see now that he wasn't kidding, Shi Chuankong grumbled. The spatial pressure in here is at least twice as potent as it is in the outside world, so the creatures in here would have had to adapt, thereby making them physically stronger than their counterparts in the outside world, Han Li said in a grim voice. As soon as his voice trailed off, the giant lizard was already charging at him once again. Han Li clenched his right fist tightly, then launched himself toward the oncoming giant lizard, creating a deep crater each time his foot landed on the ground. The distance between the two was rapidly shrinking, and right as they were about to clash, Han Li suddenly sprang up into the air before hurtling directly toward the giant lizard like a flying spear. At the same time, he unclenched his fist and extended his fingers so that his hand resembled a flat blade, and he plunged it down toward the lizard's head. The two fingers formed by the flower branch domain were flashing with a jade-like glow, and they struck the exact spot on the lizard's head where Han Li's fist had struck just a moment ago. A huge geyser of yellowish-brown blood erupted forth as Han Li's hand pierced into the giant lizard's head, and his momentum propelled him forward until his entire arm was embedded inside. The lizard let loose an agonized roar before collapsing to the ground. Han Li's brows furrowed slightly at the pungent odor of blood in the air, and he was just about to withdraw his arm when he felt something inside the giant lizard's head. After some digging, he withdrew his hand with a palm-sized fleshy object held in his grasp, inside of which was a longan-sized yellowish-brown crystal that appeared to be the lizard's beast core. On the other side, Shi Chuankong was keeping the giant centipede occupied, while Taoist Zai seized an opportunity to rush into its mouth, then slashed Thunder Slash and Heaven Slash through the air in unison to slice it apart from within its oral cavity. Han Li then strode over and took one of Taoist Zai's sabers before forcing it into a gap between two of the scales on the centipede's head, then forcibly pried off one of the scales. After exposing the flesh of the giant centipede, Han Li plunged the saber into its head, then dug around momentarily before pulling out another beast core. "What are you doing with these beast cores, Brother Li?" Surely they don't have much tool refinement value, Shi Chuankong asked with a puzzled expression. Why don't you take a look at it first? Han Li replied with a smile, then tossed the beast core in his hand at Shi Chuankong. Shi Chuankong caught the beast core, then examined it momentarily before a hint of a surprise flashed through his eyes. This beast core contains a tremendous physical aura. Consuming it will definitely enhance one's physical constitution, Shi Chuankong said. That's right. Even though spiritual qi and devilish qi are completely absent in this place, it seems to have its own unique energy system, Han Li replied with a nod. This environment is most likely how these beasts were able to develop such formidable physical bodies, Shi Chuankong mused. The residents of this domain must be aware of the properties of these beast cores, and perhaps they'll collect these beast cores to use as a type of bodily refinement resource. In any case, it certainly couldn't hurt to collect them, and they could prove to be useful in the future, Han Li said. Exceptional foresight as usual, Brother Li. I wonder what the residents of this domain are like now that this place has been abandoned for so long, Shi Chuankong mused. Compared with the immortal realm, the people of the holy realm generally possess superior aptitude in bodily refinement. Given that one's cultivation base is useless here, I'm assuming all of the residents of this domain must place their focus solely on bodily refinement, Han Li speculated. All of a sudden, a thought occurred to him, and he released his spiritual sense throughout the surrounding area. In doing so, he discovered that while he could still use his spiritual sense here, it was also suppressed by the innate pressure in this domain, so his spiritual sensory range was reduced to only several dozen kilometers. Moments later, he pulled out the sheet of beast hide that contained the map of the domain given to him by Shi Pakong, and Shi Chuankong and Taoist Zai also gathered around to inspect the map together. I've just examined the surrounding area with my spiritual sense, and it seems like we're in this area on the map, Han Li said as he pointed at a loose scattering of islands on the edge of the map. The Grayscale Islands. Looks like it's quite a secluded area, Taoist Zai remarked. At the same time, Han Li's voice suddenly rang out in his mind. Have you recalled anything now that we're in the Sculpture spatial domain, Brother Zai? I'm sensing something, but it's all very indistinct, perhaps because we're still too far away, and I can't tell whether what I'm sensing is positive or negative, Taoist Zai replied through voice transmission. It looks like this place most likely has something to do with your amnesia. Are you getting a sense of which direction we should go in? Han Li asked. According to what I can see on the map, I seem to be getting drawn to the central region of the domain, but I can't be sure, Taoist Zai replied. Right now, we still don't know where Violet Spirit is, so let's just go in that direction for now. If there are still residents in this domain, then they'll most likely also be gathered in the central region, Han Li said. Fellow Taoist Li, there's no spiritual qi in this place, and even though I have active immortal origin stones in my body, I can only unleash some normal attacks and none of my lightning attribute abilities. Once the immortal spiritual power and the immortal origin stones run out, I'll fall into hibernation, Taoist Zai suddenly said. I figured that you would also be affected by the laws of this place. Whatever happens from here onward, try to stay out of battle as much as possible to avoid immortal spiritual power expenditure. Storage tools can't be used here, and I'm only carrying several mid-grade immortal origin stones on me, Han Li said. I suppose that's all we can do for now. Thankfully, these immortal origin stones will be enough to support me for some time, Taoist Zai replied with a nod. Right at this moment, Han Li's expression suddenly changed slightly as he yelled, "Something's coming." Taoist Zai and Shi Chuankong immediately tensed up upon hearing this, and before long, the sound of rustling began to ring out from afar. Three of them turned to that direction, to find that a white line had appeared on the distant horizon, and it was slowly approaching them. As it drew closer, the white line grew wider and wider, and it didn't take long before it had spread over the entire horizon. "What the hell are those things?" Shi Chuankong murmured in an apprehensive voice. Han Li focused his gaze on the white line to discover that it was a wave of countless fist-sized white crabs, all of which were eagerly scrambling over each other as they rushed toward the carcass of the giant lizard. Just a single one of these crabs would have actually been rather adorable in appearance, but so many of them gathered in one place presented a harrowing sight to behold, and before long, it appeared as if the giant lizard's carcass had been covered in a moving white mat. Some of the crabs had even burrowed their way into the carcass through the hole on its head, and no more than 20 seconds later, all of the flesh had been stripped from the giant lizard's carcass, leaving behind an impeccably clean skeleton. If it weren't for the large volumes of yellowish-brown blood that had seeped into the ground, Han Li would have easily mistaken the carcass as one that had already been here for many years and been stripped down to its bones due to erosion. A grim look appeared on Shi Chuankong's face as he reflexively tried to leap high up into the air, but he was instantly forced back down onto the ground by the spatial pressure in this place. Clearly, it was going to take some time for them to grow accustomed to their inability to use immortal spiritual power and devilish power. "Rest assured, fellow Taoist Shi, these white armor crabs are only scavengers, so they pose no threat to us," Taoist Zai suddenly said. Sure enough, the white crabs were giving the three of them a wide berth, scurrying around them en route to the giant centipede carcass. Once again, in the span of no more than 20 seconds, the entire carcass was also devoured. "How do you know what these things are, fellow Taoist Zai?" Shi Chuankong asked with a puzzled expression. Taoist Zai faltered slightly upon hearing this, then replied, "I'm not sure, I feel like I've seen them before." Shi Chuankong was rendered speechless upon hearing this. "Let's get out of here. Let's try and find some residents of this domain to see if we can gather any leads on Violet Spirit," Han Li said. Shi Chuankong could see the concern on Han Li's face, and he consoled, "Don't be so worried, Brother Li. Fellow Taoist Violet Spirit was able to ascend from a lower realm just like you, and that's a reflection of her power and resourcefulness, so I'm sure she'll be fine even in this Sculpture spatial domain." Shi Chuankong's words didn't offer much reassurance to Han Li, but he still nodded as he said, "Thank you, fellow Taoist Shi. If it wasn't for you, even getting into this place would have been a very difficult task for me." "There's no need to thank me. Think about how many times you've saved my life in the past. Even back in the Gray Realm, I've never seen you look so concerned. It looks like fellow Taoist Violet Spirit really is extremely important to you. Let's just set off right away. I don't need any rest," Shi Chuankong sighed. "We do indeed need to make haste. Right now, Weeping Soul is still laying unconscious in my domain treasure, and even though I've placed many pieces of purple sun warm jade in there and arranged for puppets to look after her, I won't be able to enter the domain as long as I'm in the Sculpture spatial domain. So I won't know if something goes wrong or if the supply of purple sun warm jade runs out," Han Li said with tightly furrowed brows. "That's even more reason to remain calm and focused, Brother Li. This place is not like other places, and you won't be able to use the majority of your abilities here, so we have to proceed with caution," Shi Chuankong said. "Let's keep going," Han Li replied with a nod, and with that the three of them continued onward. After crossing over a nearby ridge, a plain that was slanted slightly downward appeared. Tihi terrain was relatively flat, and it stretched onward for hundreds of kilometers. However, the earth was riddled with enormous cracks, and there wasn't any vegetation in sight. Occasionally, some dust would be thrown up into the air by a passing gust of wind, only to be instantly forced back down to the ground by the ever-present spatial pressure. Han Li's trio made their way down from the ridge, then strode over the cracked earth, leaving 3 long trails of footsteps behind them. Even though they couldn't fly, they were still traveling quite quickly on foot. Along the way, they occasionally encountered some strange scaled beasts, but none of them took the initiative to attack them, so Han Li's trio left them alone. At around dusk, the three of them arrived on the edge of an island. At this point, the sun had already most likely set, and its dying rays basked the entire earth in an orange glow, while the sound of beastly roars began to ring out over the plain. Han Li turned back to take a glance at the plain that they had just crossed over, then turned his gaze back forward with his brows tightly furrowed. Beyond the edge of the island was a layer of indistinct black mist that resembled a cloud of smoke, separating the island that they were on from the neighboring one. "It looks like it's not going to be easy to pass through here," Han Li remarked. "The other island is only several thousand feet away. Can we really not just jump across?" Shi Chuankong asked. In response, Taoist Zai merely picked up a rock from the ground, then hurled it at the opposing island. The rock sped through the air, but as soon as it flew into the air above the black mist, it abruptly stopped cold in its tracks. Immediately thereafter, it was as if it had suddenly been slapped down by an invisible hand, and it was sent plummeting down into the mist. Han Li's trio listened intently for a while, but they couldn't hear the sound of the rock landing, and Shi Chuankong looked down as he remarked, "It seems like whatever's down there, it's extremely deep. My guess is that there's nothing but boundless space beneath this black mist. If we fall into it, we'll plummet perpetually through space, and there's no telling when we'll reach the bottom. In fact, there's a very good chance that there is no bottom," Han Li speculated as he peered into the black mist. "Doesn't that mean that we're trapped on this island? It seems like the beasts on the island are even more active at night, so things will only get more dangerous from here onward," Shi Chuankong said with tightly furrowed brows. Han Li was just about to respond when the sound of flapping wings suddenly rang out from the opposing island, and he hurriedly cast his gaze in that direction to find a strange bird that was around 20 feet tall flying toward them over the black mist. The bird had a bulky body that was covered in stiff azure feathers, with a long neck and a disproportionately large head, and its wingspan was around 10 feet wide. It was flying in a very strange fashion in that not only was it flapping its wings with all its might, it was also frantically stepping down onto the space beneath it with its talons, looking extremely awkward and uncoordinated. However, its methods were clearly effective, and with each step that it took, the air beneath its talons would explode to create a burst of upward propulsion force that counteracted the spatial pressure above the black mist, thereby allowing it to fly over the area. A hint of elation flashed through Han Li's eyes as he yelled. Those azure feathers on this bird's body seemed to be able to drastically reduce the spatial pressure exerted upon it, thereby allowing it to fly over the black mist. If we can capture it, perhaps we can ride it to the other side. As soon as his voice trailed off, hundreds of the same birds flew out of the black mist, and all of them were flying in the same frantic and uncoordinated manner toward the island that Han Li's trio was on. The birds paid no heed to the trio, displaying no fear at all, and they were galloping toward the mountain ridge at the center of the island. Han Li's trio hurriedly ducked and weaved from side to side to evade the flock of birds, and before long, all of the birds had flown past them. "With that many of them, there will definitely be enough for us to use," Shi Chuankong said with an exultant smile. "Let's go after them," Han Li said, and the three of them immediately set off after the flock of birds. Even as the birds were galloping along the ground, the same explosions of air were erupting beneath their talons with every single step, propelling them forward at an extraordinary speed. In contrast, Han Li's trio were only able to rely on their own physical prowess, and they were being outsped. Han Li was still able to somewhat keep up, but at this point, Shi Chuankong and Taoist Zai had already been left close to 10 kilometers behind. Over the course of the chase, the sun completely set, and stars began to appear in the sky. Even as Han Li continued to gallop along, he was constantly scouring his surroundings in a wary fashion. On a barren plain, one dark shadow after another popped up, seemingly out of nowhere, and they came in all shapes, forms, and sizes, but all of them were laying quietly on the ground, seemingly waiting for something. Han Li was rather bewildered to see this, but he continued his pursuit of the flock of birds without pause. By the time the pursuit reached the mountain range, night had already completely fallen. There wasn't a single cloud in the sky, and a lone moon was hanging high up above, surrounded by countless bright stars. Under the moonlight night sky, Han Li's trio was treated to an astonishing sight. Countless white armor crabs had appeared all over the entire mountain ridge from top to bottom, and they even spilled out onto the flatter areas outside of the ridge. At this moment, all of their shells were gleaming with specks of hazy white light that resembled tiny lamp flames, and it was as if a starry night sky had appeared on the plain to mirror the one up above, presenting a spectacular sight to behold. Han Li was standing on the ridge as he observed the surrounding area, and he discovered that all of the creatures on the island were also glowing with the same specks of white light, except most of them were concentrated on their heads. At the same time, he could sense a faint yet familiar power from the light. It was none other than the starpore that he had drawn upon, while cultivating the great universe origin arts. The more Han Li saw, the more bewildered he became. Could it be that this starpore was what allowed all of these creatures to survive and cultivate in the bleak environment of the Skalptia spatial domain? Right at this moment, a string of loud cracks rang out, and Han Li hurriedly turned to discover the flock of strange birds that had flown to this area, preying on the white armor crabs on the ground with their long beaks. A small disturbance ran through the cluster of white armor crabs, but they didn't flee en masse, nor did they retaliate against the flock of birds. More commotion was also ringing out further away, and Han Li could see that some of the larger beasts had begun preying on the smaller beasts present. So they're here to feed on the white armor crabs. Should we go after them now? Shi Chuankong asked. Let's wait for a bit longer. If we strike now, we could attract a lot of unnecessary trouble. Let's approach them slowly, then find a suitable location to strike from, Han Li said. With that, the three of them each snuck over to a vantage point before hiding behind some cover, so that they were out of sight. Around an hour later, the flock of birds seemed to have had their fill, and they began galloping back in the same direction that they had come from. Han Li immediately made a hand signal to Shi Chuankong upon seeing this, and the latter instantly sprang into action, springing up into the air to pursue the flock of birds. Right as one of the birds ran past him, he attempted to pounce onto its back, but the bird suddenly dodged to the side, then raised one of its thick and strong legs before aiming a kick at Shi Chuankong's chest. Despite the bird's rather dumb and bulky appearance, it was extraordinarily fast and agile, and Shi Chuankong was caught completely off guard, taking a kick straight to the chest. A series of profound acupoints instantly lit up over his chest, and his entire body seemed to have been enshrouded in a layer of hazy light. Right as the ninth acupoint on his chest lit up, a loud explosion rang out, and a burst of invisible force erupted out of a small hole on the underside of the bird's food, before exploding right in front of Shi Chuankong's chest. Shi Chuankong felt a burst of tremendous force crash into his chest, striking him with a sense of asphyxiation, and he was launched back through the air before crashing heavily down onto the ground, only drawing to a halt after rolling end over end around a dozen times in a row. On the other side, Han Li was also just about to jump onto a bird's back, but upon seeing what had happened to Shi Chuankong, he immediately ducked down preemptively. Sure enough, the bird aimed a kick at him as well, but he was able to evade the attack, then slid right along the bird's body before straddling onto its back. The bird shuddered slightly under his weight, but then immediately stabilized itself and continued to gallop onward. Meanwhile, Taoist Zai rushed over to examine Shi Chuankong's condition, and the latter had already risen to his feet and was dusting himself off. It appeared that he hadn't sustained any injuries, but there was a slightly awkward look on his face as he said to Taoist Zai, "There's an opening on the underside of these birds' feet that can release bursts of powerful force. No wonder they were able to run over that area with the black mist." He then turned his attention to Han Li, upon which he discovered that Han Li was straddled atop his bird's back, with his arms wound tightly around its long neck. His body was bobbing up and down in a rather comical fashion as the bird galloped along, but overall, he appeared to be quite stable, and the bird didn't seem to have been down much by his added weight. However, right at this moment, the bird's head suddenly swiveled around close to 180 degrees, and it pecked down at Han Li's left eye at an extraordinary speed. Han Li was clearly prepared for a sneak attack, and he laid back to evade the bird's beak strike. However, before he had a chance to stabilize himself, the bird suddenly stomped its talons into the ground and sprang up into the air. As it began its descent, it abruptly spread its wings, thrusting Han Li's legs up into the air, and he almost fell off its back as a result. In response, Han Li pushed off with both hands against the bird's back, launching himself up into the air before quickly falling back down thanks to the spatial pressure in the environment. As he did so, Han Li intentionally increased the force of his descent, plummeting heavily down onto the bird's back. The bird was also in the process of a descent, and with Han Li falling onto its back with such immense force, it let loose an involuntary squawk before crashing to the ground with a loud thump. A crater that was hundreds of feet in size appeared on the ground, and even with its tremendous leg strength, the bird was unable to remain on its talons, kneeling to the bottom of the crater. All of the creatures that were basking in starlight in the surrounding area hurriedly dispersed in alarm, while all of the other birds fled in all directions. Shi Chuankong and Taoist Zai rushed over to the edge of the crater to find Han Li straddled atop the bird, with one hand pressed against its head, and his other hand gently stroking the feathers on its back. Initially, the bird struggled vehemently, but a few moments later, its struggle ceased, and it began gently rubbing its head against Han Li's hand in an affectionate manner. Han Li gently patted the bird on the back, and it stood up again, then bent its legs slightly, following which a loud explosion of air rang out as it leaped out of the crater with Han Li on its back. After jumping out of the crater, the bird galloped over the plain with Han Li on its back for a while, and it was even faster than before. While it galloped along, it flapped its wings while blasting air out of the holes on the underside of its feet, and it was able to fly about a foot above the ground. After briefly testing out the bird's abilities, Han Li instructed it to land in between Shi Chuankong and Taoist Zai, following which he jumped down from its back and said, "This bird doesn't seem to have a name, so I'll call it a hover-flight bird. It's extremely difficult to tame, and once captured, it must immediately be subdued using spiritual sense." "No wonder you were stroking its head earlier, you were brainwashing it," Shi Chuankong jibed. "As you just saw, this bird is capable of flying with one person on its back, and it should be able to reach the other island just fine, even with the added load. On top of that, it's also quite fast, so it makes for a very good steed," Han Li said. "That's great. In that case, we're killing two birds with one stone," Shi Chuankong said with an elated smile. "Brother Shi, I saw some profound acupoints light upon your chest earlier when you were being kicked by one of the other birds. Are you also using some type of bodily refinement cultivation art?" Han Li asked. "That's right. Beings of our holy race are born with powerful bodies, so we don't have to focus as much on bodily refinement as humans. However, The laws of space that I'm cultivating are quite special, and it required me to further strengthen my body. On top of that, my physical constitution was enhanced even further thanks to my breakthrough to the high zenith stage, Shi Chuankong explained. That's good to hear. I presume you must be very confident in your own physical body, given you were willing to come on this trip with me, Han Li said with a smile. As for exactly how many profound acupoints Shi Chuankong had opened up, Han Li didn't pry as the subject potentially concerned secrets of Shi Chuankong's cultivation. I wouldn't dare to say I'm very confident, but I should be able to lend you some assistance here and there, Shi Chuankong said with a smile. Right now, we only have one hover flight bird. Are we going to take turns riding it to the other island? Taoist Zai asked. Let's not do anything else for tonight. Even though the creatures on the island are very active at night, it appears that they've only come out to absorb starpor, so they shouldn't pose much of a threat. We don't know what things are like on the other island, so let's rest here for tonight, Han Li decided after some contemplation. That does sound like a safer course of action, Shi Chuankong agreed with a nod. Thus, the three of them sat down, with their legs crossed on the slightly slanted ground at the foot of the mountain ridge, before closing their eyes to cultivate. Han Li attempted to channel his great 5-elemental illusion mantra, only to discover that he was unable to draw upon his own immortal spiritual power, as if it had congealed within his body. A wry smile appeared on his face as he opened his eyes, then turned to take a glance at Taoist Zai and Shi Chuankong, only to discover that they weren't giving off any spiritual power fluctuations, either. Han Li closed his eyes again and continued to meditate, and the night steadily wore on. All of a sudden, Han Li's eyes sprang open as he took a glance up at the sky above. All of the stars in the sky were glowing extremely brightly, to the point that the island was illuminated to be as bright as day, presenting a spectacular sight to behold. After looking up at the stars for some time, a thought suddenly occurred to Han Li, and he began to channel his great universe origin arts. As soon as he did this, a series of profound acupoints lit up over his body one after another, and they were also glowing just as radiantly as the stars up above. Shi Chuankong and Taoist Zai both opened their eyes to look at Han Li upon sensing this, and the former was looking on with keen interest, while the latter closed his eyes in a disinterested manner. Some time later, Han Li heaved a forlorn sigh before opening his eyes. He had already achieved full mastery of the great universe origin arts, so he was unable to channel the cultivation art to absorb any more starpor. The profound acupoints all over his body faded at his behest, with the exception of a single one on his chest. After some contemplation, Han Li pulled out a longan-sized yellowish-brown crystal, and it was none other than the giant lizard's beast core. Compared with back when it had first been pulled out of the lizard's body, the beast core's aura had already abated significantly, but the starpor flashing within it was only growing brighter and brighter. Han Li's brows furrowed slightly as he held the beast core in his hand and attempted to refine it, only to recall that without any immortal spiritual power, this was an impossible task. He slapped a hand to his own forehead with a self-deprecating smile, and right as he was about to stow the beast core away again, he caught a glimpse of the hover-flight bird out of the corner of his eye, and he suddenly recalled the scene of the birds feeding on the white armor crabs. After a brief hesitation, he tossed the beast core into his own mouth before swallowing it. As soon as the beast core entered his stomach, he immediately felt a burst of heat begin to travel through his lower abdomen, before transforming into a faint burst of power that began to travel toward his leg. He hurriedly looked down to discover that a slight change was taking place within a brand new acupoint on the inside of his leg. It was only a minute change, but Han Li was ecstatic to see this as he could sense that a brand new profound acupoint was showing signs of opening up in his body, and most importantly, This change didn't appear to be accompanied by any negative side effects. A hint of surprise flashed through Shi Chuankong's face as he watched Han Li swallow the beast core, and he approached Han Li before asking, "What are you doing, Brother Li? Do you still have the beast core that I gave you earlier?" Han Li asked with an eager expression. "I do," Shi Chuankong replied as he hurriedly pulled out the centipede's beast core before handing it to Han Li. Han Li accepted the beast core before examining it momentarily, then swallowed this one as well. Immediately thereafter, the same burst of heat reappeared in his lower abdomen, then also transformed into a faint burst of power that surged toward the new acupoint in his leg. "It's not enough, I need more," Han Li said in an excited manner. "What's going on, Brother Li?" Shi Chuankong asked with slightly furrowed brows. "Those two beast cores contain starpore and can open up profound acupoints. We won't be able to refine them, but we can absorb the starpore within them by directly devouring them," Han Li explained. "Is that true?" Shi Chuankong exclaimed as a hint of excitement appeared on his face as well. "All of these creatures have clearly come out at night to absorb starpore. Just capture one of them and harvest their beast core and you'll be able to see for yourself," Han Li replied with a smile. Shi Chuankong immediately rushed away into the distance upon hearing this, and before long, he returned with the carcass of a scaled feline creature that was around 10 feet in length. Shi Chuankong tossed the carcass onto the ground, then split its head open with his black saber before pulling out a tiny core around the size of a pea. These small guys only have tiny beast cores in their heads, while the larger ones are quite rare and extremely fast, so I wasn't able to catch any of them, Shi Chuankong complained. "It's fine, give this one a try first," Han Li said with a smile. Shi Chuankong nodded in response, then sat down with his legs crossed, and he swallowed the beast core after rubbing it clean before closing his eyes. Moments later, he reopened his eyes as he asked with slightly furrowed brows, "Did I do something wrong just now, Brother Li? Why can't I sense anything happening in my body?" "The beast core that you just swallowed was far smaller than the other two. It appears that the fearsome a beast is, the larger its beast core would be," Han Li analyzed. "That's probably a reasonable guess. However, looking at the creatures on this island, it appears that the lizard and the centipede that we killed may be the two most powerful beasts here," Shi Chuankong remarked. "It's fine. Right now, our priority is to cover more ground, and we can just try again when another opportunity arises in the future," Han Li replied with a nod. "If any powerful beasts try to get in our way from here onward, then I'm not going to spare it." Shi Chuankong chuckled as he eagerly rubbed his hands together. The two of them chatted for a while longer before returning to seated meditation. The next morning, Han Li was riding the hover-flight bird on the edge of the island, and it was rushing toward the area filled with black mist with a run-up of roughly 100 meters. With each step the bird took, a loud explosion would ring out beneath its talons, sending dust erupting in all directions. The more it accelerated, the larger its strides became, and upon reaching the edge of the island, it abruptly sprang up into the air, launching itself into the air above the black mist, where it spread its massive wings. The surrounding space was filled with a burst of spatial pressure that was far more pronounced than before, and it seemed to only be growing stronger. Blasts of air were constantly erupting out of the holes on the underside of the bird's feet, and it was also flapping its wings incessantly as it galloped forward with much difficulty. Flying over this area was quite difficult to begin with, and with the added burden of Han Li on its back, the bird was clearly flying at a lower altitude than before, only just barely staying above the black mist. Han Li pressed his own body tightly against the bird's back, doing his best to hide himself beneath its wings, and at the same time, his entire body was tensed up as he looked forward in a wary fashion. Thankfully, the distance between the two islands was very short, and the hover flight bird was very familiar with this trip, clearly having already made it countless times before, so it quickly arrived on the opposing island with Han Li. Han Li jumped down from the bird's back upon reaching the island, and as soon as he landed on the ground, he could immediately sense that the spatial pressure here was stronger than before. After taking a moment to acclimate himself to these new conditions, he patted the hover flight bird, sending it back to the other side to transport Shi Chuankong and Taoist Zai across as well. After reaching the island, the two of them also detected this increase in spatial pressure, much to their dismay. This island is a lot larger than the previous one, and the spatial pressure on the island also seems to be a lot stronger, Shi Chuankong remarked. Indeed, I presume the creatures on the island will only be more formidable, so we're going to have to proceed with caution from here onward, Han Li said in a grim voice as he gently stroked the hover flight bird's head. It's all thanks to this little guy that we were able to make it here at all. We should find out where these birds come from and capture two more. We'll be able to travel faster with these birds as our steeds, and that'll allow us to find any potential settlements of residents faster, Shi Chuankong suggested. I've already scoured the area with my spiritual sense, and there's a canyon a few dozen kilometers away from here. The hover flight birds from last night are residing there, Han Li said. Around half a day later, the three of them flew out of the canyon, with each of them rising atop a hover flight bird, pursued by hundreds of other furious hover flight birds. Over 2 months flew by in a flash. 3 hover flight birds were gathered together in a hilly area, pecking incessantly at the ground. Under a giant rock not far away lay the carcasses of 2 scaled sawtooth mammoths that were each over 1,000 feet tall, and there was blood still trickling out of their mouths. Each of them had a large hole on the top of its head, and the beast cores inside their bodies had already been dug out. Han Li and Shi Chuankong were seated on the giant rock several meters apart with their backs facing each other, and all of their profound acupoints were glowing faintly. Meanwhile, Taoist Zai was standing off to the side, looking into the distance in an expressionless manner. Shortly thereafter, Han Li and Shi Chuankong opened their eyes, and the former exhaled as he said, "It seems like these beast cores really can increase the amount of starpor in our bodies and enhance our physical constitutions, but they're not enough on their own to open up new profound acupoints." Indeed, even so, after devouring so many beast cores up to this point, both of us have benefited immensely. At the very least, we're far more resistant to the spatial pressure in this domain than before. I must say, devouring beast cores here is a far faster form of physical cultivation than any physical cultivation methods that I can think of in the outside world, Shi Chuankong said with a smile. If we can devour some more beast cores, we'll be better equipped to deal with the spatial pressure once we reach even larger landmasses, Han Li said. Fellow Taoist Li, those giant scorpions are catching up to us again. It looks like they'll reach us in more than 30 seconds, Taoist Zai suddenly called out. What a pain in the backside. If it isn't for the fact that their beast cores have no value, we should have eradicated all of them long ago, Shi Chuankong spat through gritted teeth. Just ignore them. We're about to reach the landmass soon and they won't be able to get to us there, Han Li said with a smile. With that, the three of them got on their hover flight birds and continued onward. One morning, several months later, a scaled panther-like beast was prowling along the edge of a barren desert, tearing at the flesh of a giant lizard that was already long dead. All of a sudden, its ears perked up as it raised its head in a wary fashion and began peering into the mist on the edge of the wilderness. A huge shadow was currently making its way through the mist. The panther-like beast hurriedly ran back close to 1,000 feet upon seeing this, then turned back to see what was happening. Right at this moment, a giant dark green turtle that was over 100 feet tall flew out of the black mist, then slowly descended onto the edge of the desert. The turtle's shell had some very peculiar patterns, and it was also giving off a faint sheen, reflecting specks of green light under the morning sun. There were 3 men standing on the giant turtle's back, and they were none other than Han Li's trio. Taoist Zai was scouring the surrounding area with an indifferent gaze, and as soon as he caught sight of the panther-like beast, the latter immediately fled into the distance, abandoning the giant lizard carcass. After several months of travel, Han Li's trio had finally left the Gray Scale Islands and arrived on the Brown Valley continent. During their travels, they had done their best to avoid powerful creatures, but they were still attacked no fewer than 100 times. On the majority of occasions, they were able to get away and avoid a battle thanks to the hoverflight bird's speed, but there had been some unavoidable confrontations that they had no choice but to engage in. Among them, there had been 2 particularly grueling battles, one of which was a battle against a pair of giant armadillo-like creatures, which they were able to slay to procure a pair of beast cores the size of an infant's fist. During the other battle, they were attacked by an earthworm that was over 1,000 feet in length, which had suddenly sprung up out of the ground to devour all 3 hoverflight birds. Not only did the earthworm possess a tremendously powerful body, it was also extremely cunning, immediately burrowing into the ground at the first sign of danger. In the end, Han Li's trio was finally able to leave its territory after close to half a month of cautious travel. After that, the 3 of them had traveled for over a month before encountering this creature, which Han Li had named the Space Walking Turtle. Just like hoverflight birds, this turtle was somehow able to resist the spatial pressure in this domain thanks to certain special properties of its shell, and it was able to traverse through even the areas enshrouded in black mist. It was thanks to this space-walking turtle that they were able to traverse through the misty area between the final island and this continent, an area that spanned close to 10,000 feet. At this moment, the 3 of them were all seated on the turtle's back in silence, not because there was nothing to say, but instead because they were all silently withstanding the spatial pressure on this continent, which was over 10 times more potent than before. Under such immense pressure, Han Li felt as if all of his internal organs had been squished together, and his ears were also ringing every time he took a strained breath. Scales had already appeared over Shi Chuankang's body, as he revealed part of his true devilish form to help him withstand the pressure. In contrast, Taoist Zai was faring much better than the 2 of them thanks to his puppet body. On this continent, Han Li's spiritual sense was being suppressed even further, to the point that his spiritual sensory range was only around 30 to 40 kilometers in radius. Up to this point, they hadn't encountered any residents of this domain, nor any signs left behind by Violet's spirit, and he was beginning to grow a little concerned. This domain was far more massive than he anticipated, and it also had a terrible environment that rendered one's cultivation base completely useless, so one could only deal with the hazards present in this place with their physical prowess. It had already been over a century since Violet's spirit was cast into this place, and he couldn't help but fear for her safety. Right at this moment, he suddenly detected something, and the space-walking turtle beneath him also drew to a halt at his behest. "What is it, Brother Li? Are we being attacked?" Shi Chuankang asked, while Taoist Zai also turned to him with an inquisitive look. Han Li remained silent as he cast his gaze toward a small mountain several kilometers away. Shi Chuankang also turned his attention to the same mountain, but wasn't able to see anything special about it. Before Shi Chuankang had a chance to ask any further questions, Han Li suddenly patted the shell of the space-walking turtle, and it resumed its flight at his behest, with its feet gliding through the air like oars. Its speed was inferior to that of the hoverflight bird, but not by much. Around 1,000 feet away from the small mountain, Han Li leaped up into the air, then crashed heavily to the ground under the immense spatial pressure. However, he didn't even take a moment to steady himself before rushing up the small mountain as quickly as he could, and Shi Chuan-Kong and Taoist Zai exchanged a perplexed glance with each other, before also jumping down from the turtle's back in pursuit of Han Li. The mountain was no more than 1,000 feet tall, and Han Li had rushed all the way to the entrance of an obscure cave that was around half the height of a grown man halfway up the mountain. Shi Chuan-Kong caught up to him before Taoist Zai, but before he had a chance to say anything, Han Li had already squeezed his way into the hole. Shi Chuan-Kong's brows furrowed slightly upon seeing this, and he hurriedly also followed along. After squeezing into the hole and passing through a tight passageway, he emerged into a spacious area around twice the size of the average room. The ceiling was also extremely tall, and there were several large holes in it, allowing the natural light from outside to filter through and illuminate the entire cave. Shi Chuan-Kong looked around to discover 4 strange-looking bodies on the ground in the cave, and Han Li was crouched down beside one of the bodies, seemingly examining something. Shi Chuan-Kong also began to inspect the bodies himself, and upon closer inspection, he discovered that 2 of the bodies weren't actually bodies. Instead, they were a pair of humanoid puppets, except their heads had been smashed, and large holes had also been punched into their chests. As for the other 2 true bodies, their upper bodies were bared to reveal a layer of gray scales, and they appeared rather withered and dried out, perhaps because they had been dead for quite some time, or perhaps it had something to do with their cause of death. Before long, Taoist Zai had also entered the cave, and he asked in a puzzled manner, "What are these things?" "They're most likely fugitives that were exiled into this place," Shi Chuan-Kong replied. "Brother Shi, can you see anything from these bodies?" Han Li asked as he rose to his feet with tightly clenched fists. "2 of these are bodies, while the other 2 are puppets, and judging from their injuries, they seem to have killed each other, indicating that they're most likely from 2 opposing forces," Shi Chuan-Kong deduced. "I'm thinking the exact same thing. I think they were fighting over someone here," Han Li said with a grim expression. A look of realization appeared on Shi Chuan-Kong's face upon hearing this. "You don't mean—" "That's right, I've found something of violet spirits here," Han Li confirmed as he spread a hand open to reveal a black veil usually worn over a woman's face. "Are you sure this belongs to fellow Taoist violet spirit?" Shi Chuan-Kong asked. "Her blood is on this veil, and there's no way I'll misidentify her aura. The battle that took place here was most likely over her, so she's probably been abducted by whichever side that came out on top," Han Li said. "The state of these bodies indicates that they're already long dead. I wonder when fellow Taoist violet spirit was here," Shi Chuan-Kong mused. "That's impossible to tell for now. On the way here, I didn't discover any trace of her, nor did I detect her aura, so there's a very good chance that she didn't enter the Sculpture spatial domain from the entrance in the Blackwater region. Perhaps there are other entrances to this domain in the Devil Realm," Han Li sighed. "That's definitely a real possibility. I'm sure Lady Ju wasn't willing to tell Pakong exactly where fellow Taoist violet spirit entered the Sculpture spatial domain from. If we had known that this was a possibility, we should have asked Su Fu before we came in here," Shi Chuan-Kong mused with a concerned expression. "I did consider it, but there wouldn't have been any point. If violet spirit really was sent into the Sculpture spatial domain through an entrance overseen by him, would he have dared to admit it if he became aware of our objective? He would have either only lied to cover for himself, or even fed us false information," Han Li said. "Well, the good thing is that we have some leads now. As long as we can track down one of the 2 forces that were here, we'll be able to find out more information about fellow Taoist violet spirit's whereabouts," Shi Chuan-Kong said. Han Li offered no response. It was clear that violet spirit had suffered some form of injury here, and that left him feeling very concerned. Let's go. Seeing as we've confirmed that she's on this continent, it's only a matter of time before we find her, Han Li said, then made his way out of the cave. Half a month later, Han Li's trio arrived in a mountainous area, and it was near impossible for the space-walking turtle to make any progress here as it could only hover a few dozen feet above the ground. So Han Li had no choice but to release it and continue on foot. One day at around noon, the trio arrived at a long and thin valley, where an elated look suddenly appeared on Han Li's face. "Have you found something?" Shi Chuankong immediately asked upon noticing Han Li's expression. Han Li made a quieting gesture, then began to quickly move to his left while also waving for Shi Chuankong and Taoist Zai to follow along. Before long, the three of them had traveled close to 10 kilometers and arrived on the summit of a small mountain, where they hid behind a large rock, peering out at a col that was several dozen kilometers away. There was a fierce battle taking place within the col, and they didn't get any closer for fear of being detected by the combatants. One side was a giant tiger-like beast that was over 300 feet in length and around 70 to 80 feet tall. Its entire body was covered in huge dark brown scales that were giving off a metallic sheen, and its legs were incredibly thick and strong, while its paws were tipped with scythe-like claws that presented a fearsome sight to behold. What was particularly eye-catching were the 9 black bone spikes that resembled giant spears growing on the creature's back. At this moment, the tiger-like beast was locked in battle against 7 or 8 men with very dark and coarse skin, and they were incredibly muscular and tall, significantly taller than even Han Li. They were clad in suits of crude, gray bone armor, and the weapons that they were wielding also appeared to have been fashioned from some type of beast bone. Despite its enormous frame, the tiger-like beast was remarkably agile, attacking with its fangs, claws, and its tail. A series of craters had been smashed into the ground, and the shockwaves erupting from the battle had sliced numerous deep gashes into the nearby mountain faces. The armored men had specks of light glowing all over their bodies, and they were able to move so quickly that they transformed into gray blurs, allowing them to evade all of the tiger-like beast's attacks. Compared with their movements, the giant beast's attacks were made to look very clumsy and maladroit. The specks of light on the bodies of those men were none other than profound acupoints, and even the one with the least profound acupoints among them had opened up over 10, while their leader had a total of 50 to 60 profound acupoints distributed over his body. On top of that, the placement of his profound acupoints were highly specialized, with some on his chest and abdomen, while the rest, consisting of close to half, were gathered in his right arm. Are these fugitives that were exiled into the Skalpsha spatial domain? We've finally run into some. Should we go and meet them? Shi Chuankong asked in an elated manner. The fact that they were exiled here indicates that they're not good people, so I think it's best to stay put and observe for now, Han Li replied, and Shi Chuankong nodded in agreement. The armor-clad men were constantly moving around the tiger-like beast, striking its body with their bone weapons whenever the opportunity arose. The bone weapons appeared to be quite crude, but were extremely sharp, and they were able to slice through even the scales on the giant beast's body to inflict long gashes. As more and more gashes were inflicted onto the giant beast's body, its scales were quickly stained red, and it was moving far slower than before. It attempted to escape on several occasions, but was unable to break out of the encirclement, and it had begun panting heavily. All of a sudden, the giant beast let loose a thunderous roar, and its eyes began to glow crimson like a pair of red lanterns, while the 9 bone spikes on its back began trembling and buzzing incessantly. "Look out, it's about to use its trump card," one of the armor-clad men warned. The leader of the ground immediately pounced on this opportunity, rushing over to the tiger-like beast, before swinging the giant bone sword that he was wielding down upon the giant beast's shoulder. A gruesome gash that was dozens of feet in length was instantly sliced into the giant beast's shoulder, and blood came gushing out in a frenzy. The tiger-like beast howled in agony, then turned to the leader of the group before letting loose a thunderous roar, and the 9 bone spikes on its back began vibrating rapidly before collectively hurtling toward him as 9 black blurs. The 9 bone spikes produced a shrieking sound as they hurtled through the air, but the man seemed to have already anticipated this, and he swung his bone sword through the air to deflect the oncoming bone spikes. A string of loud metallic clangs rang out, and all 9 bone spikes were sent flying in different directions. But the giant bone sword in the man's hand was also knocked out of his grasp. However, the man didn't back down at all, and he stomped a foot down onto the ground, causing the earth to shatter beneath his feet. The force of the stomp propelled him up into the air, and in the next instant, he had already arrived above the giant tiger's head. At the same time, the profound acupoints on his right arm began glowing radiantly, and he plunged his arm straight at the giant tiger's forehead. A loud and gruesome crunch rang out, and his arm was able to pierce straight through the skull of the giant tiger until the entire arm was embedded into the giant beast's head. The giant tiger let loose an earth-shattering roar, then swayed a few times before finally collapsing to the ground. Both Han Li and Shi Chuankong's expressions changed slightly upon seeing this, and they exchanged an astonished glance with each other. While the two of them were confident that they could have also defeated that giant tiger, there was no way that they would have been able to do so with such ease. Inside the call, a chorus of cheers rang out as the giant tiger collapsed to the ground. The man who had dealt the killing blow pulled out his arm, and it was covered in blood and intracranial fluids. With a swing of his arm, all of that was shaken off, and he spread his hand open to reveal a fist-sized beast core that was giving off radiant white light. A pleased look appeared on the man's face at the sight of the white beast core, and he placed it into a beast hide pouch hanging from his waist. A young man with an ox horn tattoo on his face retrieved the man's bone sword, then offered it up with both hands as he said with a fawning smile, "Your war dagger profound arts are becoming more and more fearsome, brother Chen Yang. Even a sword-scale tiger can't withstand a single hymn from you now. At this rate, it won't be long before you accumulate enough accolade points for a 4-star badge. I hope you won't forget us when that time comes." The other men in the group collected the 9 bone spikes, then also began flattering their leader. "As long as you serve me well, all of you will be rewarded for your efforts," Chen Yang promised as he took his sword back, and everyone else hurriedly expressed their gratitude. "All right, hurry up and dissect this sword-scale tiger and pull out all of the usable star bones, then return to the stronghold. Our hunting trip ends here for today," Chen Yang instructed. "What about you, Brother Chen?" one of the men asked. "I still have some matters to take care of, so just go ahead without me," Chen Yang replied as he turned his gaze to the spot where Han Li's trio was hiding. "He spotted us. Run," Han Li immediately said before rushing away into the distance as quickly as he could, followed closely by Shi Chuankong and Taoist Zai. The 3 of them were rushing toward a mountain range up ahead, hoping that the complex terrain inside the mountain range would deter Chen Yang from giving chase. Chen Yang gave a cold harumph as he set off in pursuit of Han Li's trio, vanishing into the distance in the blink of an eye, while the other men in the call looked on with perplexed expressions. However, they did as they were told, dissecting the sword-scale tiger carcass before quickly pulling out 4 bones that were glowing faintly with white light. One of the men pulled out a large pouch that he used to store the 4 bones and the 9 bone spikes, following which the group of men departed. Han Li's trio was traversing through the mountain range in an extremely agile fashion, but Chen Yang was significantly faster than them, and the gap between them was rapidly shrinking. Before long, the two parties were separated by only several kilometers. Han Li could sense Chen Yang rapidly getting closer, but he remained calm and composed as he said, "It looks like we won't be able to get away." After exchanging a glance with Shi Chuankong, the two of them suddenly drew to a halt in a clearing. Shortly thereafter, a gray shadow rushed onto the scene, then stopped not far away from them to reveal Chen Yang. "Keep going, why did you stop?" Chen Yang jeered with a mocking sneer on his face. "We have no intention of causing any offense. We heard the sounds of your battle from earlier, so we were curious and decided to take a look," Han Li said as he cupped his fist in a salute. "Puppet City scoundrels, at least put that puppet away before you try and lie to me." Chen Yang sneered as he took a glance at Taoist Zai, then pounced forward as he made a grabbing motion with his right hand. All of the air within a radius of several hundred feet rumbled violently, forming white air currents that were visible even to the naked eye. The white air currents converged to form a giant white hand that was over 100 feet in size, and it came swooping down upon Han Li's trio. Han Li was rather perplexed about what Chen Yang had just said, but in this situation, he had no choice but to retaliate, and all 36 of his profound acupoints lit up as he threw a punch up at the giant white hand. At the same time, Shi Chuankong drew his black saber before slashing it upward, instantly releasing a black saber projection amid an ear-piercing screech. Two resounding booms rang out as a huge hole, and a long gash were inflicted upon the giant white hand, causing most of it to explode, but a small part of it still survived and grabbed onto Taoist Zai before returning to Chen Yang's side like lightning. Chen Yang was rather surprised to see Taoist Zai being captured by him without putting up any resistance, while Han Li pounced at Chen Yang before launching both fists at his chest. Shi Chuankong also sprang forward through the air, arriving on the other side of Chen Yang before slashing his saber down toward Chen Yang's shoulder like lightning. In the face of their attacks, Chen Yang remained completely unfazed as he lashed out with both arms like lightning, with his left hand meeting Han Li's fists, while his right swept toward Shi Chuankong's black saber. Two bursts of tremendous force erupted out of his arms, and a thunderous boom rang out as Chen Yang's left arm clashed against Han Li's fists. Han Li immediately felt a burst of searing pain shoot through his fists, as if the bones in his hands were about to break, and at the same time, he was sent flying back like a cannonball. Simultaneously, all of the profound acupoints on Chen Yang's right fist began glowing radiantly, making his arm resemble a divine weapon, and as soon as his right arm clashed against Shi Chuankong's black saber, the latter was instantly snapped into two with a faint crack. Shi Chuankong was astonished to see this. The black saber was a graded devilish treasure that had been refined using exceptional materials, yet it had been snapped as if it were nothing more than a twig. Chen Yang's right arm continued to sweep from left to right, swinging toward Shi Chuankong's chest as fast as lightning. Shi Chuankong let loose a loud roar as he stomped a foot down onto the ground to send himself shooting back in retreat, and at the same time, over 40 silver profound acupoints emerged over his chest and abdomen, while a thick silver film of light appeared over his entire body. This was none other than this true extreme film, and in contrast with Han Li's smooth true extreme film, this one was riddled with spikes like a hedgehog. Chen Yang paid no heed to Shi Chuankong's spiky true extreme film as he slammed his right arm into Shi Chuankong's chest, and the true extreme film was torn apart with ease, while Chen Yang's arm remained completely unscathed. Immediately thereafter, a resounding boom rang out as Shi Chuankong was sent flying back through the air, then slammed heavily into a nearby mountain face to create a huge crater. A long gash had been sliced into the true extreme film in front of his chest, and a wound so deep that bone was visible through it had also been inflicted onto his chest. This wasn't a particularly severe injury for Shi Chuankong, so he was able to instantly spring back to his feet, but there was an alarmed look in his eyes, and he didn't dare to unleash any further attacks. Han Li's expression also darkened slightly upon seeing this. Even though he had only made contact with Chen Yang's left arm, the force of the clash had left his entire body feeling numb, and even now, he was still feeling a little dizzy. After forcing back Han Li and Shi Chuankong, Chen Yang took a glance at the snapped black saber in Shi Chuankong's hand, then turned his gaze to Taoist Zai before finally turning his attention to the blood on his right hand. He briefly sniffed at the blood on his hand, upon which a hint of surprise flashed through his eyes. Han Li took a glance at Taoist Zai to discover that the latter was laying on the ground in a completely still manner, seemingly having had some type of restriction placed upon his body by Chen Yang. A determined look appeared in his eyes as he took a deep breath. No matter how formidable Chen Yang was, he couldn't leave Taoist Zai behind. He clenched his fists tightly as the 36 profound acupoints on his body began to glow radiantly, and at the same time, a giant golden ape projection appeared around him before fusing into his body. A layer of thick golden fur instantly appeared over his skin, and at the same time, he transformed into a giant golden ape that was several dozen feet tall in the blink of an eye. Chen Yang raised an eyebrow upon seeing this, and he grinned as he beckoned to Han Li. A sharp gleam flashed through the giant golden ape's eyes, and it let loose a low roar before launching its fists through the air in a rapid-fire barrage. Golden fist projections erupted toward Chen Yang like shooting stars, causing the space in their wake to rumble violently. However, Chen Yang remained completely unfazed as he thrust his left hand forward, and all of the golden fist projections instantly drew to a halt in front of him, as if they had encountered an unbreakable wall. Immediately thereafter, all of the golden fist projections exploded, sending shockwaves sweeping through the air in all directions, while the giant golden ape had already vanished from the spot. In the next instant, the golden ape reappeared in a wraith-like manner behind Chen Yang, then lashed out with its giant fists at Chen Yang's back. Chen Yang reacted very quickly, swiveling around as he swung his glowing right arm toward the oncoming giant fists. All of a sudden, the profound acupoints on the golden ape's body flashed momentarily, and its enormous body shrank down to the size of the average grown man as it crouched down to lower its center of gravity. Chen Yang was caught completely off guard, and his right arm struck nothing but empty air, while his body also swayed involuntarily from the momentum generated by his arm's swing. Han Li pounced on this opportunity to spring forward like an agile monkey, darting past him before picking up Taoist Zai from the ground. "Get back here!" Chen Yang roared with a furious expression as he reached out with both hands, and his arms abruptly elongated to around twice their original length, allowing him to grab onto Han Li's waist. Bursts of white finger projections erupted out of his fingertips, and in particular, the ones that had erupted out of the fingers on Chen Yang's right hand were extremely bright, causing the nearby space to ripple and warp. Due to the extreme spatial pressure in the Sculpture spatial domain, the space here was extremely stable, so it was very remarkable that Chen Yang was able to make the space ripple with his right hand. In response, Han Li conjured up his true extreme film, but it stood no chance against Chen Yang's fingers and was torn apart with ease. However, right at this moment, 7 or 8 true spirit projections suddenly sprang out of Han Li's body, and 7 or 8 layers of light of different colors also surfaced around him. In the instant that Chen Yang's fingers grabbed onto Han Li's waist, he suddenly felt Han Li's skin become extremely slick, causing his fingers to slide off his body. As a result, Han Li was able to escape, and he instantly flew to several hundred feet away, then turned to look at Chen Yang with a wary expression. At this point, he had already reverted back to his human form, and he was looking a little pale. The 12 awakening transformations was an ability that was supposed to be unleashed using a combination of one's bloodline power and spiritual power. Given that he currently had no access to immortal spiritual power, Han Li could only forcibly draw upon his bloodline power to unleash the 12 awakening transformations, and that was extremely taxing on him. Instead of giving chase, Chen Yang remained standing on the spot as he observed Han Li with a surprised expression. "Are you all right, fellow Taoist Li?" Shi Chuankong asked as he rushed over to Han Li's side with a hint of embarrassment in his eyes. Thanks to the boundless resources of the devilish imperial family, he had managed to open over 40 profound acupoints, but when it came to mental fortitude and tenacity, he was far inferior to Han Li. "I'm fine," Han Li replied as he rubbed a hand over his waist, and the palm of his hand was instantly stained with blood. At this moment, there were 5 long gashes on his waist that were bleeding profusely, but things could have been much worse. "I didn't think the fugitives in this domain would be so strong. What do we do now? Should we use the trump card given to us by Pakong to kill this man?" Shi Chuankong asked through voice transmission. Han Li offered no response. He had his spirit refinement technique as a trump card, so he wasn't afraid of Chen Yang. "You two are new guys from the outside, right?" Chen Yang suddenly asked, and the profound acupoints all over his body quickly faded away. "That's right. We were only just cast into the Sculpture spatial domain by the Night Sun Empire. Who are you and why did you attack us?" Han Li asked. "I knew it. This is all a misunderstanding. I didn't recognize you two, and I saw a puppet by your side, so I attacked you on the assumption that you were from Puppet City," Chen Yang explained. Han Li and Shi Chuankong exchanged a glance upon hearing this, and they remained cautious and apprehensive. "Don't worry. If you two are new here, then we're not enemies," Chen Yang said with a smile, suddenly displaying a friendly demeanor. After communicating briefly with Shi Chuankong through voice transmission, Han Li cupped his fist in a salute as he said, "Seeing as this was all a misunderstanding, then let's end things here and let bygones be bygones." "My name is Chen Yang. May I ask your names, fellow Taoists?" Chen Yang asked. "Li Feiyu." "Shi Kong." Due to his sensitive status, Shi Chuankong had given a false alias. "It's a pleasure to make your acquaintance, fellow Taoist Li, fellow Taoist Shi," Chen Yang said with a wide smile, and the tense atmosphere was significantly alleviated. "What is this puppet city that you spoke of earlier, fellow Taoist Chen?" Han Li suddenly asked. "That's a long story. To give you a summary, the survivors in the Sculpture spatial domain are currently split up into 2 major powers. My companions and I come from Profound City, while Puppet City represents the opposing major power, which is why I attacked you just now," Chen Yang explained with a smile. "I see," Han Li replied as he nodded with a contemplative expression. "Profound City and Puppet City. Those are 2 rather interesting names," Shi Chuankong remarked. "As I'm sure you figured out by now, it's impossible to use devilish qi and spiritual qi in the Sculpture spatial domain. Hence, in order to contend against all of the native beasts of the domain, the only options are to pursue bodily refinement or rely on puppets. Our Profound City is filled with bodily refinement cultivators, while those Puppet City specialize in puppeteering," Chen Yang explained with a smile. "I see," Shi Chuankong replied with a nod. "The environment in the Sculpture spatial domain is extremely unforgiving, and it's very difficult to survive here in small groups. Would you be interested in joining our Profound City? I can see that both of you have already opened up many profound acupoints, so you would be perfect additions to our city," Chen Yang invited. Han Li was internally quite excited to hear this. He was just considering joining Profound City or Puppet City to find more leads on Violet Spirit. So this offer from Chen Yang had come at the perfect time. Despite this, his expression remained unchanged, and he pretended to be contemplating the offer while also giving Shi Chuankang a subtle look. Shi Chuankang immediately caught on to his intentions, and he asked, "Would you be able to tell us more about Profound City, fellow Taoist Chen?" As I just said, our Profound City is primarily inhabited by bodily refinement cultivators, and our city lord is Master EQI. He's an unfathomably powerful bodily refinement cultivator who's opened over 1,000 profound acupoints, and it's all thanks to his protection that we're able to live safely in this Sculpture spatial domain. Chen Yang introduced as a hint of admiration surfaced in his eyes. Han Li and Shi Chuankang were both astonished to hear this. Bodily refinement was extremely difficult, yet even devilish beings were blessed with many physical advantages and also had access to an abundance of resources in the devil realm. Shi Chuankang had only ever heard of a few cultivators who had opened 800 profound acupoints. Master EQI is far above what the likes of us can hope to reach, but I can see that both of you also possess remarkable aptitude when it comes to bodily refinement, so why not come to our profound city to further yourselves? Chen Yang invited once again. Would you be able to give us some time to consider this matter, fellow Taoist Chen? Han Li asked, but he received no response, and as he turned his gaze to Chen Yang, he discovered that the latter had suddenly begun looking up at the sky with a grim expression. Han Li also looked up at the sky upon seeing this, and he discovered that some dark clouds had suddenly appeared up above. "Is there a problem, fellow Taoist Chen?" Shi Chuankang asked. However, Chen Yang didn't appear to have heard him at all, and he murmured to himself, "Why has it come so early this year?" "Fellow Taoist Chen, are you all right?" Han Li asked in a louder voice, and only then did Chen Yang snap back to his senses. Han Li's brows furrowed slightly upon seeing this, and he repeated his request from earlier. "Of course you can take some time to consider my offer, but we have to leave this place right away," Chen Yang replied in an urgent manner. "Is there something wrong with the clouds in the sky, fellow Taoist Chen?" Shi Chuankang asked with slightly furrowed brows. "Those aren't just normal clouds. Instead, they're a precursor to the furious wind natural disaster of the Sculpture spatial domain. It happens every year, but I didn't think it would come so early this year. This wind is too powerful to resist through one's individual power. My companions and I have an underground stronghold nearby, and we have to go there right now," Chen Yang urged. Shi Chuankang's expression changed slightly upon hearing this. "Have you heard of this furious wind, fellow Taoist Shi?" Han Li asked through voice transmission upon noticing his reaction. "I've seen some records of this natural disaster in an ancient book in Pakong's study, but the records weren't very detailed, only referring to it as a devastating wind-based natural disaster. Judging from Chen Yang's reaction, it must be very devastating indeed," Shi Chuankang replied. "In that case, we'll have to trouble you to lead the way," Han Li said to Chen Yang. "All of us were exiled into this place by the Night Sun Empire, so we should be looking out for each other. Please come with me, fellow Taoists," Chen Yang replied as he turned to leave. "Before that, please undo the restrictions that you've placed on this puppet of mine, fellow Taoist Chen," Han Li suddenly said. "Of course, I completely forgot," Chen Yang said as he slapped a hand to his own forehead, then pulled out a golden needle from Taoist Zai's elbow. The needle was several inches in length and as thin as a hair, and there were tiny patterns visible on its surface. A hint of intrigue appeared in Han Li's eyes at the sight of the golden needle. Chen Yang continued to pull more golden needles out of Taoist Zai's joints as he explained. "These are dragon whisker needles, and they were developed by a powerful figure in our profound city to be used specifically on puppets." "I see," Han Li replied with a nod. After the 9th golden needle was pulled out, Taoist Zai immediately returned to his feet, much to Chen Yang's surprise. Is there something wrong, fellow Taoist Chen? Han Li asked. Generally speaking, puppets restricted by dragon whisker needles require a period of recuperation to recover after the needles are pulled out, so this puppet of yours must be quite remarkable to have been able to stand up right away, Chen Yang explained. Perhaps it's because it wasn't sealed for all that long, Han Li replied, giving an ambiguous excuse. Chen Yang was in a hurry to leave, so he didn't dwell on this topic, and he stowed the golden needles away as he said, "Let's go." Around 2 hours later, the four of them arrived in a valley that was surrounded by mountains in 3 directions, making it a very obscure location. At this point, the dark clouds in the sky had already become quite heavy, and arcs of black lightning could be seen flashing deep within them. At the same time, gusts of fierce wind had already begun to blow through the area, and even though the wind wasn't powerful enough to pose a threat to Han Li and the others, it carried bursts of bone-chilling glacial qi that infiltrated their bodies, constantly robbing them of their body heat. Thankfully, they had already arrived at their destination, and Chen Yang led Han Li's trio to a mountain face in the deepest point of the valley, where there was a giant gray rock pressed tightly against the mountain face. Chen Yang pushed the giant rock aside to reveal a cave that led underground, and an armor-clad man with a head of red hair immediately rushed out from within. "You're finally back, Brother Chen. Hooray, these three. These two are fellow Taoist Li and fellow Taoist Shi. They've only recently been exiled here, and I've taken them here to shelter them from the furious wind," Chen Yang explained. "I see. It's a pleasure to make your acquaintance, fellow Taoists. Come in. Right now, the furious wind is only in the approaching phase. The true furious wind is more than 10 times as fearsome as what we're currently experiencing," the red-haired man said as he made an inviting hand gesture. Han Li was quite astonished to hear this. The current furious winds were already quite a struggle for him to deal with. If they were to become 10 times more powerful, then even if he could survive them, the outcome would not be pretty. With that in mind, he entered the cave behind Chen Yang. As soon as he entered the cave, the howling wind instantly subsided, and there was still some glacial qi in the air, but it was far less pronounced inside. "Fang Bei, seal the entrance shut and come down with us. If you let the glacial qi of the furious wind infiltrate your body, it'll be very difficult to expel," Chen Yang said. The red-haired man seemed to be very touched to hear this, and he immediately gave an affirmative response before springing into action. Chen Yang led Han Li's trio deeper into the cave, which extended in a downward direction. It appeared to be a naturally formed cave that was later renovated, and even after walking for several thousand feet, there was still no end in sight. However, at this point, the glacial qi in the air had already significantly abated, allowing everyone to heave a collective sigh of relief. "Thank you for inviting us here, fellow Taoist Chen," Han Li said as he cupped his fist in a grateful salute. If it weren't for Chen Yang's invitation, he and Shi Chuankong would truly be in some peril. "It's fine, don't worry about it, fellow Taoist Li. Us exiles have to look out for each other," Chen Yang said in a nonchalant manner. The four of them walked onward for another 15 minutes before finally reaching the bottom of the tunnel, where they arrived in a cave that was over 100 feet in size. The ground was quite level, and at the very center of the cave was a large ovular stone table, around which were 7 or 8 stone chairs. A series of crude stone rooms had been carved into the walls of the cave, and at this moment the cave was completely empty, while the doors of all of the stone rooms were tightly shut, indicating that everyone was in their rooms, taking shelter from the furious winds. The furious winds will blow for about a month or so before subsiding. In the meantime, you can stay here and consider the matter of joining our profound city, Chen Yang said. Both Han Li and Shi Chuankong nodded in response. Virtually all of the stone rooms were currently occupied, so the two of them sat down in the cave. Chen Yang took a glance at the two of them, then also sat down in the cave instead of entering any of the stone rooms. Even through the mountain, the three of them could still hear the wind howling outside, and the ground was also gently trembling, while loose rocks were falling incessantly from the ceiling of the cave. At the same time, loud crashing noises were ringing out incessantly, as if even the entire continent itself were trembling in the face of the furious winds. Over the past few months, Han Li and Shi Chuankong had been attacked by some of the scaled beasts in the Sculpture spatial domain, but none of them had posed a true threat to them, so they were beginning to think that the supposed dangers of the Sculpture spatial domain were rather exaggerated. However, they now knew just how wrong they had been. "Should we join Profound City, fellow Taoist Li?" Shi Chuankong asked through voice transmission. "What do you think?" Han Li asked. "It looks like the Sculpture spatial domain is far more dangerous than we anticipated. As opposed to searching aimlessly for fellow Taoist violet spirit, I think it's a good idea to join Profound City. Having said that, it sounds like Profound City and Puppet City are sworn enemies, so if we can't find fellow Taoist violet spirit in Profound City, then it'll be difficult for us to go to Puppet City to continue our search," Shi Chuankong said. "That's true, but right now, we can only choose one out of Profound City or Puppet City, and judging from the current circumstances, choosing Profound City appears to be more beneficial to us," Han Li said. "It sounds like you've already made a decision. Honestly, I also really want to go and see what this Profound City is all about," Shi Chuankong replied with a smile. "Why is that?" Han Li asked. "If Chen Yang is to be believed, then City Lord Equi of Profound City has opened over 1,000 profound acupoints, so there must be many bodily refinement cultivation arts in the city. Such cultivation arts are priceless treasures, and there aren't that many of them even in our imperial family's military vault. If we can get our hands on those cultivation arts, not only will we be able to enhance our own powers, Pakong will also be able to make use of them once we get out of here," Shi Chuankong said. A faint smile appeared on Han Li's face upon hearing this. This was actually also one of the factors that had influenced his decision to join Profound City. He was very much in awe of Chen Yang's incredibly powerful right arm, and it showed him just how powerful bodily refinement cultivators could become. He had always possessed decent aptitude in this field, but his progress had been hampered by a lack of suitable bodily refinement cultivation arts. After some further discussion, the two of them quickly arrived at a consensus, following which Han Li rose to his feet and began making his way toward Chen Yang. Chen Yang had already noticed the secret conversation taking place between the two of them, and he immediately rose to his feet as well. "Fellow Taoist Shi and I have decided to join Profound City, but before that, we have a few questions that we would like to have answered," Han Li said. "Go ahead, fellow Taoist Li," Chen Yang immediately prompted. "Is there any type of cost to joining Profound City, or do we have to follow any rules?" Han Li asked. "Rest assured, fellow Taoist Li. Master EQI founded Profound City for the sake of everyone's safety, so no cost is required to join our city. As for rules, there's only one, which is that once you've joined Profound City, you cannot betray the city," Chen Yang replied. "I see," Han Li replied. "Also, I have one more question." "Go ahead," Chen Yang prompted once again. "I have a companion by the name of Violet Spirit. She's a female cultivator who was cast into the Sculpture spatial domain several decades ago. Have you heard of her before?" Han Li asked. "I'm afraid not," Chen Yang replied after a brief moment of contemplation, and Han Li's heart sank slightly upon hearing this. Chen Yang could see the disappointment on Han Li's face, and he consoled, "Don't be disheartened, fellow Taoist Li. Our Profound City has more than one city. Aside from the main city, there are also several subsidiary cities, and I'm from one of them, a city by the name of Green Goat City. Communication formations can't be used in the Sculpture spatial domain, so information isn't easily shared between the cities. Perhaps your friend has gone to one of them. I see. Thank you for answering my questions, fellow Taoist Chen. Fellow Taoist Shi and I would like to join Profound City, Hanli said as he cupped his fist in a salute, and Shi Chuankong also stood up to join him. Great! From this day forth, you two will be fellow brothers of our Profound City, and I'll take you to Green Goat City as soon as the furious winds subside, Chen Yang replied in an elated manner. Right at this moment, the red-haired man also arrived in the cave, and he immediately chimed in, "Welcome, fellow Taoists." With Han Li and Shi Chuankong agreeing to join Profound City, the atmosphere instantly became much more relaxed and harmonious, but there were still bursts of glacial qi seeping into the cave, so everyone quickly sat down again to ward off the glacial qi. Thankfully, most of the glacial qi had been kept out by the mountain, and what little managed to sneak through posed no threat for powerful, profound immortals like Han Li and the others. As soon as Han Li sat down onto the ground, Taoist Zai's voice suddenly rang out in his mind. "Are you all right, Brother Zai?" Han Li asked through voice transmission as he turned to Taoist Zai, who was seated not far away. Ever since his body was sealed by the dragon whisker needles, Taoist Zai had remained silent, even when Han Li had tried to communicate with him, and that had left him feeling rather concerned. "I'm fine. In fact, those needles have stimulated my memories and allowed him to recollect some things," Taoist Zai replied. "Are these memories pertaining to the Sculpture spatial domain?" Han Li asked. "Some are, while some aren't. A lot of information flooded into my mind at once this time, and it's taken me quite some time to make sense of everything," Taoist Zai replied. "What exactly have you recalled?" Han Li asked. "The most important things that I've recalled are that there's a place called the Carefree Palace, and also two names, Equa and Sha Xin," Taoist Zai replied. "Equa, that's the city lord of Profound City. Are you somehow related to him?" Han Li asked in a surprised manner. "I don't know. The memories are too hazy. I've only recalled their names while the rest is a complete blur," Taoist Zai replied in a frustrated voice. "Don't worry too much about it. I'll find a way to look into things once we reach Profound City," Han Li said. "Aside from that, I also recalled something else that may be of help to you," Taoist Zai said as a faint smile appeared on his face. "Oh, what is it?" Han Li asked as he raised an eyebrow. Taoist Zai offered no response as he rose to his feet and made his way over to Han Li's side, then pointed a finger at his glabella. A beam of golden light flew out of his fingertip before fusing into Han Li's mind, where it exploded into countless tiny golden characters. Han Li's eyes instantly widened as an ecstatic look appeared on his face, following which he immediately closed his eyes again. The passage of tiny golden text was a bodily refinement cultivation art called the Wingform Ascension Arts. The cultivation art contained 18 profound acupoints, all of which were on the legs, and mastering the cultivation art not only enhanced one's physical prowess, but also allowed one to take flight by treading air using the power of their legs alone. The entirety of Han Li's attention was captured by the cultivation art, and only after a long while did he reopen his eyes, then said through voice transmission, "Thank you, Brother Zai. This is exactly what I need." He didn't know much about bodily refinement cultivation arts, but he could still sense that even though the Wingform Ascension Arts couldn't allow one to open that many profound acupoints, it would still significantly enhance the power of one's legs, and it was particularly valuable given that he was currently unable to fly in this domain. "If I can't beat them, I can at least run." Taoist Zai nodded in response, then sat down with his legs crossed and paid no further heed to Han Li. As for Han Li, he immediately began cultivating the Wingform Ascension Arts. Just like the great universe origin arts, The wingform ascension arts use starpor to refine the physical body and open profound acupoints, making it perfect for the starpor-rich environment of the Skalptia spatial domain. Even though he was currently underground and sheltered from the stars, he had devoured many beast cores on the way here, and the starpor from those beast cores had been stored in his body up to this point. After carefully examining the entirety of the wingform ascension arts again, he commenced his cultivation, and the starpor accumulated in his body immediately surged into a profound acupoint on his leg. The profound acupoint greedily devoured the starpor, and a feeling of extreme relaxation spread through his leg, almost making him moan with pleasure. The profound acupoint slowly began to open as it absorbed more and more starpor, and close to an entire month flew by in a flash. Han Li had remained seated with his legs crossed this entire time, but a speck of starlight had appeared on his calf, and it was flashing incessantly. All of a sudden, his eyes sprang open, and a faint crack rang out from the profound acupoint on his calf as the starlight radiating from it abruptly brightened significantly. After close to a month of arduous cultivation, he had finally opened up the profound acupoint. An excited look appeared in his eyes, and as he looked around, he discovered that Chen Yang and the red-haired man had entered their stone rooms to cultivate, while Shi Chuankong and Taoist Zai were also cultivating far away and didn't seem to have noticed what had happened to him. The starlight emanating from the profound acupoint on his calf slowly dissipated, and a perplexed look appeared in his eyes. According to the wingform ascension arts, opening these profound acupoints was supposed to be a very difficult and time-consuming process. Even though he had accumulated a great deal of starpor in his body from consuming beast cores, opening an acupoint in less than 20 days was still progress that was far faster than expected. Han Li speculated internally about the potential contributing factors for a while, then shook his head and rid himself of that train of thought. In any case, faster cultivation progress was definitely a good thing. There was still a thunderous commotion ringing out outside, clearly indicating that the furious winds were still raging. The glacial qi within the cave had become more pronounced than before, but not by much. Han Li had been immersed in his cultivation this entire time, so he hadn't detected this change in the environment. He took a glance at Shi Chuankong and Taoist Zai to verify that both of them also remained unaffected by the glacial qi, then closed his eyes and began working on opening his next profound acupoint. Another week passed by in a flash. On this day, Han Li slowly exhaled as he opened his eyes, having exhausted the last of the starpor in his body. Without starpor, no further progression could be made. At this point, the furious winds were already on the wane, and the glacial qi within them had faded away. Chen Yang and the others had also emerged from their stone rooms and were ready to set off. Many of them were quite curious about the 3 new recruits, but they quickly accepted Han Li's trio after hearing Chen Yang's explanation. Everyone quickly emerged from the underground cave into the valley above, and even though the glacial qi had faded away, the winds outside were still strong enough to cause everyone to sway unsteadily. At this point, the valley outside had already taken on a completely different appearance. A thick layer of the ground had been stripped away, while the nearby mountains were also clearly shorter than before, reflecting just how fearsome the furious winds had been. "Let's go," Chen Yang said. "Fellow Taoist Chen, why don't we wait a few more days until the winds have completely subsided?" Han Li asked. The furious winds may be a natural disaster, but they also present an opportunity. Whenever the furious winds pass through, many scaled beasts will fall to their deaths or freeze to death, and we have to go out early to find them. Otherwise, their carcasses could be eaten by other scaled beasts, Chen Yang explained. "I see. Risk and reward really do come hand in hand," Han Li replied with an enlightened expression. With that, the group set off into the distance, quickly vanishing out of sight. Ali. The bright sun was hanging high up in the sky, while howling winds were blowing over a desert. A hunting party was trudging arduously through the wind, and there were several giant-scaled beasts blocking the way ahead, with roughly 10 men walking among them. All of the men had thick clothes over their faces that covered even their necks, yet that still wasn't able to keep out the coarse sand being blown into their faces by the fierce winds. Due to the spatial pressure in this domain, even these sand particles packed immense power, making their advance quite difficult. There was an azure-robed man in the group, and he peered through a gap between the giant beast to see what appeared to be a giant shadow in the distance. "How much longer until we reach Green Goat City, fellow Taoist Chen?" the azure-robed man asked. "It's just up ahead," Chen Yang replied with a hint of elation in his voice. "Finally, rest assured, Brother Li, we'll definitely be able to find out some information about fellow Taoist Violet Spirit once we reach the city. There's no way anyone can forget someone so beautiful as long as they've laid eyes on her," Shi Chuankong jibed. "I certainly hope so," Han Li replied. After that brief conversation, the group continued onward in silence, and only after walking for several thousand more feet did the wind gradually begin to subside. At the same time, the giant shadow that Han Li had spotted in the distance earlier was revealed to be a pair of black mountains that were situated right next to each other. The mountains were riddled with pits and craters, all of which were the result of wind erosion. There was a massive canyon nestled in between the two mountains, and at the center of the canyon was a black fortress that was thousands of feet tall. The fortress was quite rugged in appearance, with 3 huge forts up above, while down below were the tall and sturdy black city walls. Inside the canyon, all of the wind was kept out by the mountains and the fortress, so the conditions were far more forgiving. Upon arriving at the gates of the fortress, Chen Yang removed the cloth from his face and shook off the sand in his clothes before making his way over to a stone platform outside the gates, then slammed a hand down onto a large gong hanging above the platform. After the gong was struck, an opening suddenly appeared above the fortress gates, and several figures peeked out of the opening before someone yelled, "Open the gates, Captain Chen Yang's back." This was followed by a burst of rumbling and some mechanical clicking, and the black fortress gates slowly opened inward. The group entered the fortress, following which the stone gates swung shut behind them. Upon entering the fortress, Han Li immediately discovered that the interior was quite different from what he had imagined. The area inside the fortress was quite large, several thousand feet in size, and there was a giant brazier hanging on the walls every few dozen feet. Some type of beast fat was being burned in the braziers, and it wasn't giving off any smoke, but it did release a faint rank odor. Significant parts of the fortress's interior was taken up by all types of gears and mechanical structures, and at the center of the fortress were 3 giant stone pillars around each of which was a winding stone staircase that led to the 3 forts up above. There were quite a few people in the fortress, all of whom were busy carrying out various tasks, and Chen Yang's subordinates were leading various types of beasts toward the right side of the fortress, while Chen Yang and Han Li's trio remained standing in the hall. Before long, they were approached by 2 crimson-robed scribes, each of whom was holding a thick book in one hand and a brush dipped in red ink in the other. Chen Yang seemed to be very familiar with these 2, and one of them, a round-faced man with a small horn on his glabella, smiled and remarked, "It looks like you made quite a bountiful trip, Captain Chen Yang." "Indeed, we were very fortunate not to have come back empty-handed." The other scribe was a man with long ears and a square face, and there was a cold look on his face as he took a glance at Han Li's trio before asking, "What category do these 3 fall into?" A slightly awkward look appeared on Chen Yang's face as he replied, "They're guests of mine, and they wish to join our Green Goat City. As for which category they fall into, that'll have to be decided when I meet with the city lord. I'm afraid that's inappropriate, Captain Chen Yang. According to the rules, newcomers must be categorized as soon as they enter the city, the square-faced scribe said as his brows furrowed slightly. The other scribe hurriedly began playing the role of mediator, tugging on his colleague's sleeve as he said, "Surely we can trust Captain Chen Yang. He's one of the city lord's most trusted hunting captains, and it's not like he's outright refusing to categorize these three newcomers, so let's just wait until he meets the city lord." The square-faced scribe hesitated momentarily upon hearing this, then nodded in response. "I suppose it can't hurt." A grateful smile appeared on Chen Yang's face as he said, "You have my thanks. I'll have to trouble the two of you to tally the spoils of our hunting trip. Please accept these as a small gift." He reached out and subtly handed the two scribes a pair of beast cores as he spoke, an offering that the two scribes naturally gladly accepted. Following their departure, Chen Yang turned to Han Li's trio as he said, "I have to go and meet with the city lord later, so I'll arrange a place for the three of you to stay first." "Who were those two?" Han Li asked. "They're the two scribes of our Green Goat City, and they're responsible for tallying the spoils from hunting trips and registering newcomers," Chen Yang replied. "What are the categories that he was talking about?" Han Li asked. "There are two categories that all newcomers fall into upon arriving in our city, namely acquired citizens and defected citizens. Acquired citizens are higher in status, able to join the city guards or hunting parties, and they'll also receive more resources, whereas defected citizens are lower in status and can only serve as manual laborers and receive lesser resources," Chen Yang explained. "These categories are used to determine the social hierarchy, right?" Han Li asked. "Come with me, I'll tell you more about it as we walk," Chen Yang said with a smile, then began to lead the way toward the left side of the fortress. Han Li and Shi Chuankang exchanged a glance with each other before following along. "According to the rules of our city, all newcomers must undergo an appraisal before being registered, following which roles will be arranged. However, I've seen your power with my own eyes, so I wanted to request the city lord to skip that process and have the two of you become my subordinates. I'm assuming the two of you would prefer to stay together, right?" Chen Yang asked. "Isn't that against the rules?" Shi Chuankang asked. "Rules are made by people, are they not? If I follow the regular procedure, only for the two of you to be assigned elsewhere, then I'll be kicking myself. Having said that, as for whether you'll be undergoing an appraisal, that'll be up to the city lord," Chen Yang said. Han Li nodded in response. "With your powers, I don't think it'll take very long at all before both of you become captains of new hunting parties. When that time comes, I hope you won't forget about me," Chen Yang chuckled. As the conversation continued, the four of them passed through 3 stone archways to arrive before a cave that had been carved into a mountain. Only then did Han Li discover that Green Goat City had actually been constructed within artificial cavities inside the 2 mountains. Directly across from the cave was a humanoid stone statue, the subject of which resembled a human with no devilish features, but their facial features were very blurry and indistinct. "Is this a statue of the city lord?" Han Li asked. "No, this is an extremely old statue, even older than Green Goat City, and even our city lord doesn't know who created this statue. Perhaps only City Lord Eqi of Profound City knows how this statue came into existence," Chen Yang replied. "I see," Han Li said. "The left peak of Green Goat City is split up into 4 levels. The level we're on right now is the refinement level, and it's where all of the city's armor and weapons are produced, as well as all of our pills are refined. Most of the armor and pills that are produced go straight to the city lord for him to distribute as he sees fit, while only a small portion are released to be sold in the few shops in the city," Chen Yang introduced. What about the other levels? Shi Chuankong asked. The level above this one is where the defected citizens reside, while the level above that one is where the acquired citizens live, and the top level is where the city lord's manor is situated. You can take a rest in my manor while I go to see the city lord, Chen Yang replied. After that, Chen Yang led Han Li's trio on a brief tour of the bottom level, then led them up a spiral staircase to the third level. This level was far smaller than the bottom level, and it was also clearly less populated. There was a wide road that stretched into the heart of the level, and the road was lined with entrances to cave abodes. Chen Yang's cave abode was situated near the middle of the path, and it was one of the better and more spacious cave abodes in the area. Han Li's trio followed Chen Yang into the cave abode, upon which they were immediately greeted by a woman and 3 men. Among them, the 3 men were dressed in servant attire, while the woman's clothes were also a drab gray color, but they had been tailored to fit her extremely well and perfectly accentuate her curves. However, her looks could only be described as ordinary, and she was not particularly beautiful. These are also technically defected citizens, but they're also my personal property. If you're interested, you can have some fun with this maidservant of mine. Women are a precious resource here, and not everyone gets to have one, Chen Yang said in a direct and straightforward manner. I'm a little weary from our journey, so I think I'll take a rest first, Han Li replied, turning down the offer in a tactful manner. In that case, you can go and make yourselves at home in the guest rooms while I go and meet with the city lord, Chen Yang said. He then turned to the 4 servants and instructed, make sure to look after my guests well. After that, he departed from the cave abode. The woman stepped forward and extended a slight curtsy, then led Han Li's trio down a passageway to the guest rooms in the cave abode. Following her departure, both Shi Chuankong and Taoist Zai left their guest rooms to gather in Han Li's room. After the door was closed, the 3 of them sat down around a stone table. Do you think they'll restrict our freedom now that we've joined Profound City, Brother Li? Shi Chuankong asked. I don't think so. We'll most likely be assigned missions that'll take up some of our time. After all, given the inhospitable conditions in this domain, we'll inevitably have to make certain contributions and follow the rules, Han Li said. I hope things won't get too hectic. Honestly, I have no interest in becoming an acquired citizen or whatever, Shi Chuankong said as he pursed his lips in disdain. We don't really have much of a choice in the matter, we just have to be on our guard, Han Li said. Do you think they're going to try to plot against us, Brother Li? Shi Chuankong asked. These are all fugitives who have been cast into exile, so they're certainly not good people. If they were kind and benevolent people, then I don't think they would have been able to survive until now, Han Li replied. That's true, it's definitely better to be safe than sorry, Shi Chuankong mused. What do you think of Chen Yang? Taoist Zai suddenly asked. We haven't known him for very long, but he seems like a decent person, judging from his words and actions, and the way that he treats his subordinates, Shi Chuankong replied. Have you noticed something amiss about him, Brother Zai? Han Li asked. Like fellow Taoist, she just said, we haven't known him for very long at all, so it feels a little strange that he's willing to break the rules of Profound City for our sake, Taoist Zai mused. I don't think that's anything out of the ordinary, he's clearly just trying to win us over, Shi Chuankong said in a nonchalant manner. Perhaps so, but we definitely can't let our guards down nevertheless, Han Li said. Ali. Meanwhile, in a giant hall on the top level of the left wing of Green Goat City, there were a series of huge braziers that appeared to have been fashioned from beast skulls hanging from the walls of the hall, and the flames burning inside illuminated the entire hall. At the back of the hall was a massive stone table, engraved with many complex designs depicting the stars that appeared at night. Behind the table was a large black stone chair with a sheet of beast hide draped over it, upon which sat a physically imposing black-robed man. One half of his face was covered in black scales, while the other half was severely mutilated as if it had been burned before. On top of that, he was twice the height of the average grown man, and his physique was almost comically muscular, presenting an extremely fearsome sight to behold. Furthermore, his eyes were very unique, with tiny pupils that had a glowing silver ring around the outer edge. Chen Yang was standing not far from the other side of the table in a bowed position, delivering a report. The man on the chair was none other than City Lord Du Qingyang of Green Goat City, and after hearing Chen Yang's report, an intrigued look appeared on his face as he mused. A human, a devil, and a sentient puppet. That's quite an interesting trio. No one has heard about them yet, right? Rest assured, City Lord Du, I've already instructed my subordinates to keep their mouths shut, Chen Yang hurriedly assured. I heard that Profound City and Puppet City had recently fought over someone from the outside, and Puppet City won out on that occasion, much to Master EQI's dismay. Now, we've picked up 2 people from the outside at once. If Profound City hears about this, there's no way we'll be allowed to keep them, Du Qingyang said. That man from the devil race isn't all that important, but we absolutely cannot hand over that human. He has a true spirit bloodline in his body, and it would be a massive loss if he fell into someone else's hands, Chen Yang said. I'll leave the rest to you. Make sure you don't screw this up, Du Qingyang instructed as he leaned back in a lazy fashion. You can count on me, City Lord Du, Chen Yang assured as he cupped his fist in a respectful salute. Ali. That night, Han Li was cultivating the wingform ascension arts in his room when the sound of door knocking suddenly rang out. He opened the door to discover Chen Yang standing outside with an apologetic expression. Han Li invited him into the room, upon which he said, I must apologize, Brother Li. I was thinking that the city lord would be willing to agree to my request to exempt the 3 of you from undergoing the appraisal process. But to my surprise, he turned me down and scolded me for not upholding the rules of the city. It's fine, we should be following the rules in the first place, and we're happy to participate in the appraisal, Han Li replied. Even though the city lord turned down my request, he did agree to let both of you join my hunting party as long as you can fulfill the prerequisites to become acquired citizens, Chen Yang said. What are these prerequisites? Han Li asked. The appraisal assesses the power of one's physical body. To be more specific, it assesses the number of profound acupoints one has opened up, and those who have opened 16 or more profound acupoints will be categorized as acquired citizens, while those below that standard will become defected citizens. Those who have opened more than 54 profound acupoints can serve as the captain of a city guard team, while those with more than 72 profound acupoints can lead their own hunting party, Chen Yang explained. Han Li recalled that during their battle, Chen Yang had only revealed around 50 to 60 profound acupoints, yet he was the captain of a hunting party, so it was clear that he hadn't displayed his full power back then. I see. When will the appraisal be carried out? If I recall correctly, the 2 scribes seem to have said that it was the first thing that we were supposed to have done after entering the city, Han Li said. There's no hurry. You and Brother She must be quite weary from the long journey, so have a good rest today, and we'll carry out the appraisal tomorrow, Chen Yang replied with a smile. All right, you have my thanks, fellow Taoist Chen, Han Li said as he cupped his fist in a salute. Please don't thank me, Brother Li. I'm still feeling quite guilty that I wasn't able to exempt the 2 of you from the appraisal process altogether, Chen Yang replied with a faint sigh. You have nothing to feel guilty about, Brother Chen, Han Li assured with a smile, and the 2 of them chatted for a while longer before Chen Yang departed. Following Chen Yang's departure, Han Li sat back down in his room with his legs crossed, then devoured a beast core before continuing his cultivation. The next morning, Han Li's trio followed Chen Yang all the way to the bottom level of Green Goat City, then made their way through the Black Fortress to the city's right peak. Just like the left peak, the right peak was also divided into 4 levels. Upon entering the right peak, Han Li spotted a series of giant pens that were separated by stone walls, within which all types of massive beasts were being kept, among which were the giant beasts that Chen Yang's hunting party had captured. There were also many gray-robed defected citizens in the pens, carrying out tasks like feeding and cleaning the beasts. Han Li's trio continued onward without pause, going straight up to the second level, which was slightly smaller than the first level, but was also filled with a series of massive pens. Compared with the beasts on the first level, the ones on the second level were clearly not as obedient, and they were either baring their fangs and growling, or slamming their bodies against their enclosures. The majority of the people overseeing these pens were still defected citizens, but there were also some acquired citizen city guards among them that occasionally stepped in to discipline the unruly beasts. Chen Yang led Han Li's trio to the 3rd floor, and as soon as they arrived, they immediately encountered 2 familiar faces, namely the 2 crimson-robed scribes that they had encountered the day before. Chen Yang exchanged some small talk with the 2 scribes, following which the 2 of them led Han Li's group into an individual stone chamber. The stone chamber was quite large, significantly larger than Chen Yang's cave abode, but it was completely empty, giving it the appearance of an indoor plaza. "The puppet doesn't need to be appraised. Which one of the 2 of you wants to go first?" the square-faced scribe asked. "I'll go first," Shi Chuankong volunteered. "All right, please come this way, fellow Taoist Shi," the round-faced scribe instructed. In the center of the room was a black stone platform that was several hundred feet in radius and only no more than 2 feet tall. There seemed to be a layer of glittering white powder on its surface, which was reflecting the light of the lamps in the room. Shi Chuankong stepped onto the stone platform as instructed, and the round-faced scribe said, "There's no need to do anything complex, fellow Taoist Shi. Just activate all of your profound acupoints for us to see." Shi Chuankong nodded in response, then clenched his fists as he let loose a loud roar, immediately following which a series of profound acupoints lit up all over his body. Han Li swept his spiritual sense over the black stone platform and the glittering white power to ensure that nothing was amiss, then turned his gaze to Shi Chuankong. As more and more profound acupoints lit up over Shi Chuankong's body, it occurred to Han Li that Shi Chuankong had opened up far more profound acupoints than he had. Sure enough, Shi Chuankong's profound acupoints quickly surpassed Han Li's tally of 37, only stopping after the 45th one had lit up. At the same time, a burst of energy erupted out of his body, causing the glittering white powder around him to rise up into the air. A faint smile appeared on Shi Chuankong's face, and he was just about to step down from the stone platform when the white powder that had been thrown up into the air suddenly began to converge toward him. Due to the close proximity, Shi Chuankong didn't have any time to react before the white powder made contact with his body, and in the next instant, 3 more profound acupoints lit up over his body, bringing the total tally to 48. "What's the meaning of this?" Han Li asked as his brows furrowed slightly. "Don't be alarmed, Brother Li. The white powder on the platform is a type of ground beast bone that is used as a pill refinement ingredient, and it's able to stimulate one's profound acupoints, so it's being used here to ensure that the subject is revealing their true number of profound acupoints," Chen Yang reassured. Shi Chuankong was initially rather apprehensive, but it seemed that the powder was entirely harmless. After hearing Chen Yang's words of reassurance, he was still feeling a little displeased, but he allowed the powder to cling to his body, and before long, 52 profound acupoints had been revealed. A hint of surprise flashed through Han Li's eyes upon seeing this. Taoist Zai had been staring at this white powder intently this entire time, and it seemed that he had some recollection of what this powder was, but wasn't quite able to remember exactly what it did. Shi Chuankong had originally intended to hide some of his profound acupoints, but he had been forced to reveal everything, and he stepped down from the stone platform in a rather displeased manner. Don't be angry, brother Shi. While the main function of the powder on the platform is to force one to reveal all of their profound acupoints, it also has a beneficial effect on one's cultivation base, and this is the only chance you'll get to use it, Chen Yang hurriedly consoled. Shi Chuankong took a moment to examine his own internal condition upon hearing this, and only then did his expression ease slightly. Shi Kong, 52 profound acupoints, the round-faced scribe declared, while the square-faced scribe made records in his book. It's your turn now, fellow Taoist Li, the round-faced scribe said as he turned to Han Li. Han Li nodded in response before stepping onto the stone platform, then took a deep breath as he channeled his great universe origin arts. Once all of his 37 profound acupoints had been revealed, the white powder on the stone platform rose up once again before clinging to his body, but no further profound acupoints appeared. A hint of surprise flashed through Chen Yang's face upon seeing this, clearly taken aback by the fact that Han Li had far fewer profound acupoints than Shi Chuankong. Li Feiyu, 37 profound acupoints, the round-faced scribe declared. The square-faced scribe recorded this result, then gave Chen Yang a nod, while Han Li stepped down from the stone platform. Both fellow Taoists have fulfilled the prerequisites to become acquired citizens and can join fellow Taoist Chen Yang's hunting party. Congratulations, the round-faced scribe said as he cupped his fist in a salute. Our city is very pleased to have you, fellow Taoists. Right as Chen Yang's voice trailed off, a resounding boom suddenly rang out overhead, and the entire stone chamber shuddered violently. Han Li's trio were rather alarmed by this, but Chen Yang and the two scribes displayed no reaction. No need to be alarmed, Chen Yang reassured with a smile. The top floor of the right peak above us is our city's arena, and there must be a battle taking place right now. There's an arena here, Shi Chuankong asked as a hint of excitement appeared in his eyes. He had always been very interested in arena battles. In fact, he and Han Li had first met back in an arena in Primordial Origin City. He was just about to ask some questions about the arena when he was struck by a sense of lightheadedness, and he began to involuntarily tip forward. Right as he was about to fall onto Chen Yang, the latter smiled and took a step back, allowing him to crash to the ground. Han Li immediately realized that something wasn't right, but before he had a chance to say anything, he also began to feel lightheaded. He hurriedly bit down onto the tip of his own tongue while attempting to channel his spirit refinement technique, only to discover that his consciousness had become extremely dull and lifeless, and all of the strength seemed to have been sapped from his body. Before he had a chance to do anything else, he also fell unconscious, and the last thing that he saw before his vision faded to black was the sight of a hideous and imposing figure making his way into the room. Chen Yang's trio immediately extended a respectful salute toward the figure, who was none other than Du Qingyang. You did well, Chen Yang, Du Qingyang remarked as he took a glance at Han Li and Shi Chuankong. It was all thanks to the white profound beast bone powder that you gave me, City Lord Du, Chen Yang replied with a smile. A look of realization immediately appeared on Taoist Zai's face upon hearing the term white profound beast, and he knew that this bone powder was what had knocked Han Li and Shi Chuankong unconscious, but the realization had come far too late. Should I take them to your secret chamber, City Lord Du? Chen Yang asked. There's no hurry, I have some other plans for him, Du Qingyang replied, and the two of them weren't making any effort to keep their conversation secret from Taoist Zai, who remained standing off to the side instead of making any rash moves. All of a sudden, Chen Yang seemed to have recalled Taoist Zai's existence, and he asked, "What should we do with this puppet?" "Lock up those two for now. As for this puppet, it has some sentience, but it's of no use to me, so you can do with it as you see fit," Du Qingyang replied, then turned to depart. "Become my servant or be disassembled into a pile of scrap metal right now. It's your choice," Chen Yang declared in a cold voice. Taoist Zai took a glance at Han Li, then cupped his fist in a submissive salute toward Chen Yang. "You're not very useful in battle, but it seems like you're pretty smart. This place is boring as hell, so having a puppet around will certainly liven things up a little," Chen Yang chuckled. He then crouched down and fished a pair of black stone vials out of his sleeve, then placed one each onto Han Li and Shi Chuankong's arm before removing the stoppers. Two black centipedes that were each around 3 inches in length scurried out of the vials, and after crawling along Han Li and Shi Chuankong's arms momentarily, they dug through their skin with ease before burrowing inside. Taoist Zai could see a bulge moving along the sleeves of both of their arms before stopping at their hearts, where the bulges took on the form of rings. "Congratulations, Captain Chen Yang. With such a significant contribution, your claim over the spot of Deputy City Lord is all but assured," the round-faced scribe congratulated with a warm smile, and Chen Yang was very pleased to hear this. Meanwhile, Taoist Zai's gaze fell upon Han Li, and Shi Chuankong as a grim look appeared in his eyes. "Li." After an indeterminate period of time, Han Li woke up in a dark stone chamber that was only around 40 to 50 feet in size, and the room was completely empty aside from a stone bed at the center. At this moment, he was laying on the ground with sets of bone shackles attached to his arms and legs. Han Li tugged on the shackles with all his might, but they refused to budge. "Save your energy. All of these shackles were specially made so that even someone who's opened more than 100 profound acupoints wouldn't be able to snap them." Right at this moment, Chen Yang made his way into the room, and he was followed by a gray-robed young man who was trailing along behind him in a respectful manner. Han Li wasn't surprised to see Chen Yang here, and he said, "Chen Yang, I haven't done anything to harm your interests, and I've already agreed to join Profound City, so why have you still done this to me? It's very impressive that you're able to remain so calm in this situation, but what you just said is laughably naive. Do I need a reason to do this to you? The entire Sculpture spatial domain is a prison, and we're all fugitives. Were you expecting to see fairness and justice here?" Chen Yang scoffed in a disdainful manner. Han Li's brows furrowed slightly upon hearing this, but he remained composed as he asked, "What do you plan to do with me?" "Rest assured, fellow Taoist Li, we may be fugitives, but we're not senseless killers. Truth be told, life is very boring in this place, and the only form of entertainment available to us is watching and betting on arena battles. The arena is a money-making machine for the city lord, and a human like you is an extremely rare sight in the Sculpture spatial domain. So if you were to feature in the arena battles, I'm sure you'll generate a lot of interest," Chen Yang replied with a chilling grin. "That's why you've captured me?" Han Li asked as his eyes narrowed slightly. "We don't keep useless people around in Profound City. If you want to live, then fight and prove your worth. Perhaps you'll even be able to earn back your freedom," Chen Yang replied. Before Han Li had a chance to reply, Chen Yang turned to the gray-robed young man behind him and said, "I'll leave him to you." "Rest assured, Master Chen, I'll make sure to discipline him well," the gray-robed young man hurriedly assured. Chen Yang nodded in response, then turned to leave. "Fellow Taoist Chen, where are fellow Taoist Shi and fellow Taoist Zai right now?" Han Li hurriedly asked, but Chen Yang offered no response and quickly vanished out of sight. Following Chen Yang's departure, the gray-robed young man turned back to face Han Li with a cold sneer on his face. All of a sudden, He grabbed onto Han Li's shackles to hoist him to his feet, then slammed his other fist into Han Li's lower abdomen with a dull thump. His fist was extremely powerful, and Han Li felt as if a steel knife had been driven into his stomach. His internal organs instantly began to twist and churn, and his face turned bright red, then deathly pale, as sweat began to pour down his forehead. "Did that feel good?" the gray-robed young man chuckled. Han Li's head remained lowered, and he offered no response. The gray-robed young man was very pleased with Han Li's submissive demeanor, and he pulled out a key to unlock Han Li's shackles as he said, "Good boy. No matter who you are, if you end up in here, you have to follow my orders. Otherwise, that punch will only be an appetizer for what's to come." Han Li was very much taken aback by this, and he slowly rose to his feet with a perplexed expression. "Are you thinking about running away? Why don't you take a look at your own chest first?" The gray-robed young man chuckled coldly. Han Li looked down upon hearing this, and only then did he notice the slight bulge on his chest. He hurriedly inspected the bulge with his spiritual sense to discover a black centipede pressed tightly against his heart. "That is a black tribulation centipede that's unique to our Green Goat City. If you dare to run away or try to expel the centipede from your body, it'll immediately tear your heart to shreds," the gray-robed young man said. Han Li's brows furrowed slightly upon seeing this, but to the gray-robed young man's disappointment, he didn't appear particularly fazed. The young man harumphed coldly as he tossed a black badge at Han Li and continued, "This is your number badge. Come with me, I'll give you a tour of this place." Han Li caught the badge to find that his name, Li Feiyu, was inscribed on one side, while on the other side was a large 9 followed by the number 332 in slightly smaller text. After that, the gray-robed young man led him out of the stone chamber, and even though the young man had his back facing him, Han Li didn't consider a sneak attack. Judging from the force of that punch from earlier, the young man was quite strong, and at the very least, he had most likely opened roughly the same number of profound acupoints as Han Li. The two of them quickly emerged from the stone chamber, then made their way down a long corridor before arriving in a spacious hall that was over 10,000 feet in size, and the walls were constructed from some type of black stone material with black patterns engraved upon them. The walls were also giving off a faint black sheen that gave them an indestructible appearance. The front of the hall was connected to the outside, and waves of cheers could be heard ringing out from beyond the wall. At the very back of the hall was a white stone table that was several dozen feet in length, seated behind which were 7 or 8 crimson-robed figures who appeared to be employees of the arena. At this moment, there were many people gathered in a line in front of the stone table, all of whom wore the same attire, consisting of a wide cape and shoulder-length shorts. The walls on the right and the left of the hall were lined with doors, beyond which were passageways that led to certain places. Remember this place. This is the main hall of the arena, and it's the most important place for you. The battles take place on the platforms outside, and all of these people are gladiators just like you, the gray-robed man said. There seem to be quite a few gladiators here, Han Li remarked. Of course, there are many gladiators in our arena, some of whom are slaves like you, while others are residents of Profound City looking to hone their abilities. All of the gladiators are split up into 10 areas, and you're in the 9th one, the gray-robed young man replied. "I see. Why are all of these people lined up here?" Han Li asked. "Take a look at your badge. What do you see under your name?" The gray-robed young man replied with a question of his own. Han Li pulled out his badge, and under his own name he saw a small number, 10. "What's this?" "That's your profound points total. You receive compensation for participating in arena battles regardless of the outcome. Of course, if you win, then you'll earn far more profound points. All newbies like yourself receive 10 free profound points, and you can use these points to exchange for things like weapons, beast cores, and pills here. As for what the prices of certain items are, you can find them on the list over there, the gray-robed young man introduced as he pointed at a list on the wall next to the white stone table. Hanley turned his gaze to the list on the wall, and his eyes instantly lit up slightly. Weapons and pills weren't of particular interest to him, but beast cores were certainly very appealing to him. The gray-robed young man was very pleased with Hanley's reaction, and he continued, "On top of that, you can also exchange your profound points for chances to enter the Star Pond to cultivate." "What's the Star Pond?" Hanley asked. "It's a pond that was constructed by City Lord due through special means, and it can harness the power of the stars in the sky. The Star Pond is extremely rich with starpore, and cultivating inside it is far more effective for opening profound acupoints than devouring beast cores," the gray-robed young man replied. However, a mocking sneer then appeared on his face as he continued, "Having said that, it costs 100 profound acupoints to enter the Star Pond, so you're not even close." Hanley was unbothered by the young man's mockery, and he began to contemplate his current circumstances. It seemed that he wasn't in a particularly terrible situation at the moment. As long as he could obtain more beast cores, he would be able to continue to grow stronger. As for the problems concerning the Black Tribulation Centipede, Violet Spirit, Shi Kong, and Taoist Zai, he would just have to think of solutions later. If Chen Yang were telling the truth, then he was confident in his ability to resolve all of those problems as long as he could prove himself to be of sufficient value. For now, his top priority was to survive in this arena. The gray-robed young man seemed to have gleaned his thoughts, and he encouraged, "All of the weapons, beast cores, and other items here are of a higher quality than what you'll find outside, and that's not even to mention the Star Pond. So as long as you have what it takes, you can live a far better life in the arena than outside." Hanley nodded in response. "That's about all I have to show you. You can familiarize yourself with this place in your own time. This passageway leads to the lobby for the 9th area, and you'll have your own room there. If you have to fight in an arena battle, your badge will inform you," the young man said as he pointed at a passageway on the left side of the hall. Hanley turned to discover a large 9 inscribed above the entrance of the passageway. The other passageways were also marked with numbers, as well as some other special symbols, one of which was none other than the Star Pond. However, that passageway was tightly shut. All of a sudden, the gray-robed young man leaned in closer to Hanley, then threatened in a cold voice, "I brought you here, so just fight your battles and don't try and funny business. Otherwise, you're going to regret it." Hanley lowered his head and nodded in response, and the gray-robed young man's expression eased slightly upon seeing this. Following the young man's departure, Hanley remained standing on the spot for a moment, then made his way out of the hall. As it turned out, the hall was suspended in midair, while down below as a massive plaza, at the center of which were 3 ovular platforms arranged in a triangular formation. Around the 3 platforms was a wide and deep trench with smooth walls that were hundreds of feet tall and directly perpendicular to the ground. A row of black railing was present on top of the wall, and it was constructed from the same indestructible-looking material as the walls of the hall. Behind the railing were rows upon rows of spectator stands that were filled with countless seats. At the very center of the stands was a wide platform where bets were submitted, and above the platform was a huge board that displayed the names of the gladiators and their odds. "I'll put 50 profound coins on Kai Zheng. I'll put 70 profound coins on the scaled wolf beast." There were many people gathered around the betting platform, placing their bets. At this moment, 3 arena battles were taking place, 2 of which were battles between gladiators and scaled beasts, while the third one was between 2 gladiators. Before long, One of the battles had concluded, with a gladiator being torn to shreds by his scaled beast opponent, and his blood and scraps of his body were strewn all over the platform. The spectators in the stands were extremely excited to see this, and some were even looking a little deranged as a chaotic crescendo of thunderous voices rang out in response to the outcome. The gray-robed young man had told Han Li that one would earn profound points for participating in arena battles regardless of whether they won or lost, but he had failed to mention that a loss very likely entailed death. Han Li observed the arena battles for a short while, then made his way back into the hall to look at the list on the wall. Just as the gray-robed young man had said, profound points could be exchanged for many things here. 500-year-old fierce head beast core, 5 profound points. 800-year-old Titan bear scaled beast core, 10 profound points. Pig-faced beast core. Worm scale pill refined using 1,000-year-old worm scale beast core as the primary ingredient, 18 profound points. Golden edge tiger bone blade refined from the bones of a 2,000-year-old golden edge scaled tiger, 38 profound acupoints. As Han Li's gaze roamed down the list, the prices of the items continued to increase. While traveling to Green Goat City with Chen Yang and the others, Han Li had learned some things about the Scalptia spatial domain, and while he now knew in retrospect that Chen Yang was not to be trusted, there was no reason for Chen Yang to lie to him about the scaled beasts in this domain. Hence, he had a rough idea of the value of the items on the points exchange list. The scaled beasts of the Scalptia spatial domain were formidable creatures that were born with spatial tempering stage power at a minimum, and they could absorb starpore to further enhance their own powers. Hence, the older a scaled beast was, the more powerful it was considered to be, and the more starpore its beast core would contain. For all of the gladiators here, regardless of whether they had come here of their own volition or been enslaved like Han Li, all of them had a shared objective, which was to earn profound points so that they could exchange for items on the list to enhance their own powers. As long as one had sufficient profound points, even beast cores of scaled beasts that were tens of thousands of years old could be purchased, but of course, the price was extremely steep. At the moment, he only had 10 profound points, so he would have to bide his time for now. Han Li shook his head as he heaved a faint sigh, then continued to. All of a sudden, his attention was drawn to a certain item on the list. 2,000-year-old Taro Beast Core, 3 profound points. Han Li's eyes immediately lit up as he made his way over to the stone table, then handed over his badge to one of the crimson-robed employees as he declared, "I would like 3 2,000-year-old Taro Beast Cores." Many of the nearby gladiators faltered slightly upon hearing this, then turned to Han Li with undisguised mockery in their eyes. "Are you new here? Taro Beast Cores contain a lot of starpore, but due to the special physical constitution of these beasts, the starpore in their beast cores is very chaotic, making it very difficult to absorb, and there's a very good chance that most of it will be wasted," the crimson-robed employee said. "I see," Han Li mused with an enlightened expression. "No wonder these beast cores were so cheap. Thank you for informing me of this, but I would still like to exchange for these beast cores," Han Li said with a smile. With only 10 profound acupoints at his disposal, he really couldn't afford anything else. The crimson-robed employee didn't speak any further on the matter, and he pulled out a short silver rod before waving it over Han Li's badge, upon which his 10 profound points were instantly reduced to 1. After that, he pulled out 3 egg-sized beast cores before handing them to Han Li. Han Li stowed the beast cores away, then began to make his way toward the 9th area. After passing through a dark passageway, he arrived in a spacious area that resembled a cave. The cave was hemispherical in shape, and around 20 to 30 stone chambers had been carved into its walls, with a number assigned to each chamber. Several glowing white stones were embedded into the ceiling of the cave, but they were only able to illuminate a small area, while the rest of the cave remained quite dim. At this moment, there were around a dozen gladiators seated in the cave, conversing boisterously with one another, and all of them turned to Han Li with surprised expressions. Han Li paid no heed to them, and he quickly scanned the cave to track down the room that was labeled 332, then began to make his way toward it. Right at this moment, a tall and imposing man with a scar on his face got in his way and sneered, "You're just going to walk in here without greeting the boss first. You newbies are becoming ruder by the day." Han Li turned to the man with an expressionless manner, and the man continued, "You have 10 points on you, right? Hand them over to me, and I'll pass them on to Boss Toxic Dragon for you. Those are the rules." Everyone began to gather around, eager to watch the situation unfold. Han Li took a glance at the bystanders, and he didn't say anything. "Are you deaf or stupid?" the man roared as he slammed his fist into the door of Han Li's room. "Get out of my way. A good dog knows not to block its owner's path," Han Li said in a cold voice. "Yo, Scarface, he's calling you a dog," a round-faced fatty chortled. "You can't even get on top of a newbie, Scarface." Another man sneered, and before long, everyone was joining in on the mockery. The man's face instantly turned bright red, while a furious look appeared in his eyes. Despite his imposing frame, he was one of the weaker gladiators in the 9th area, and he was often mocked for that. Hence, he often took out his pent-up rage and frustration on those weaker than him, and bullying weak-looking newbies like Han Li was his favorite pastime. Yet he was the one being humiliated here. "You must have a death wish," Scarface roared as he chopped a hand down toward Han Li's head, aiming to split Han Li's head into two. A cold look flashed through Han Li's eyes as he retaliated with his fist, and a loud crack rang out as Scarface's arm was instantly snapped before being slammed against his chest. He stumbled back in an unsteady fashion, only coming to a halt after crashing into the wall behind him, following which he threw up a large mouthful of blood. He stood with his back against the wall, staring blankly at Han Li with an astonished expression, and all of the other gladiators had also fallen into a stunned silence. Han Li paid no heed to them as he made his way into his room, then slammed the door shut. The stone chamber was only around 30 to 40 feet in size, and it was completely unfurnished with the exception of a stone bed, a table, and a chair. A length of white tree root could be seen protruding down from the center of the ceiling, giving off a white glow that illuminated the entire room. To Han Li's surprise, the white light was fueled by starpor. He immediately released his spiritual sense toward the tree root, trying to find out where the starpor was coming from, but the material that was used to construct the walls of the room were able to keep out spiritual sense, thereby foiling his plans. Even so, he could clearly see that the tree root didn't innately harbor starpor. Instead, the starpor was being transmitted into it from elsewhere, and the root was only acting as a medium. However, the root wasn't giving off a lot of starlight, only just enough to support normal cultivation. Han Li quickly turned his attention away from the tree root and began scouring his room with his spiritual sense. After ensuring that nothing was amiss, he sat down onto the bed, where 2 sets of gladiator uniforms, consisting of a cape and a pair of shorts, had been prepared for him. Han Li's brows furrowed slightly at the sight of the uniforms, but he still took off his clothes and put on one of the sets of uniforms. After setting down his original clothes onto the bed, he opened his mouth to release his heaven-controlling vial, and a faint smile appeared on his face. Prior to reaching Green Goat City, he had swallowed the heaven-controlling vial in case of unforeseen mishaps, and it was extremely fortunate that he had done so. Otherwise, there was a very good chance that the heaven-controlling vial would have already fallen into the hands of Chen Yang. After inspecting the heaven-controlling vial momentarily, heaven-controlling vial swallowed it again before taking a seat under the white tree root. Given the current circumstances, cultivation was his top priority. Hanli pulled out a tarot beast core, and sure enough, it did contain a great deal of starpor, but all of it was very chaotic and churning like boiling water. His brows furrowed slightly upon seeing this, but he still swallowed the beast core before closing his eyes to cultivate. The beast core quickly melted into a ball of starpor in his stomach, but this burst of starpor was like an untamed wild horse. It immediately began darting in all directions in his body before seeping out into the surrounding air. Hanli hurriedly channeled his wingform ascension arts to absorb the starpor, but just as the arena employee had proclaimed, he was only able to absorb a small portion of the starpor, while the rest continued to seep out of his body. Right at this moment, the heaven-controlling vial in his stomach suddenly shuddered, following which a burst of faint light appeared at its opening, and all of the dissipating starpor was instantly sucked back in. Hanli was ecstatic to see this, and he hurriedly began channeling his wingform ascension arts again, but he wasn't able to absorb much of the starpor before the rest was sucked into the heaven-controlling vial. To that, he could only heave a resigned sigh. When it came to the ability to absorb starpor, there was no way that he could compete against the heaven-controlling vial. The starpor within the tarot beast core surged into the heaven-controlling vial, and a drop of green liquid gradually took shape. In the instant that the drop of spirit liquid fully took shape, the heaven-controlling vial immediately ceased its absorption of starpor, leaving the remaining starpor to swirl around the vial. Hanli faltered slightly upon seeing this, then continued to channel his wingform ascension arts to absorb the residual starpor around the vial. After being drawn back into his body by the heaven-controlling vial, the starpor had become far more mellow, allowing him to absorb it with ease, and the starpor emanating from the tree root up above was also fusing into his body. The starpor surged into the second profound acupoint of the wingform ascension arts, which gradually began to open. While Hanli was cultivating in his room, Scarface was seated in another stone chamber, seemingly waiting for something. His mangled arm had already returned to normal, but the skin on the arm was still very purple and bruised. Occasionally, he would turn to take a resentful glance in the direction of Hanli's stone chamber. All of the gladiators who had witnessed the incident between Hanli and Scarface quickly departed, with many of them mocking Scarface as they left. Close to a day passed by in a flash. The door of the stone chamber across from Scarface's slowly swung open, and Scarface immediately sprang to his feet as he rushed out of his own room. The sound of footsteps rang out as a tall and imposing figure emerged from the stone chamber. It was a one-eyed giant of a man who was significantly taller than even Scarface, and he was also extremely muscular, resembling a bipedal bear. There was a large azure bear head tattooed onto the man's chest, giving him an even more fearsome appearance, and his entire body was giving off a mountainous aura. "Boss, you have to stand up for me," Scarface immediately yelled as he fell to his knees in front of the giant man. The man was none other than Toxic Dragon, and his expression instantly darkened slightly at the sight of Scarface's arm. "What happened to your arm, Scarface?" "My arm was snapped by a newbie." Scarface immediately gave Toxic Dragon a heavily embellished recount of his run-in with Hanli, placing extra emphasis on how Hanli refused to hand over his profound points, even after hearing about how Scarface was going to pass them on to Toxic Dragon. "Is Scarface telling the truth?" Toxic Dragon asked as he turned to another gladiator of the 9th area who just so happened to be passing by. "That's pretty much what happened. That newbie really was quite arrogant," the gladiator corroborated. "Looks like someone needs to be taught a lesson." Toxic Dragon harumphed coldly as he began making his way toward Han Li's stone chamber. However, right at this moment, a burst of black light suddenly flashed over a badge that was hanging from his waist. Toxic Dragon stopped in his tracks, then took a glance down at the badge with slightly furrowed brows. Lucky bastard, he harumphed coldly as he began making his way back to his own stone chamber. Before Scarface had a chance to raise a question, Toxic Dragon said, "I have a battle to fight. Rest assured, I'll make sure to teach that newbie a good lesson once I'm back." Scarface hurriedly nodded in response, and Toxic Dragon took one final glance at Han Li's stone chamber before departing. "Looks like you'll get to live a little longer," Scarface spat in a resentful manner before also departing. Han Li was naturally completely oblivious to what had just happened outside. At this moment, he was seated with his legs crossed in his room, holding the final Tarot Beast Core in his hand, and after a brief hesitation, he swallowed the Beast Core before channeling his Wingform Ascension arts. Moments later, the second profound acupoint on his leg lit up, and as time passed, it became brighter and brighter. Some time later, the light emanating from the profound acupoint abruptly brightened significantly, then immediately dimmed again. An ecstatic look appeared on Han Li's face upon seeing this. Thanks to the 3 Tarot Beast Cores, he was finally able to open a second profound acupoint. He pushed off against the ground with one hand to launch himself up into the air, then began to walk around in his room at a far faster speed than before, and the heavy sensation that he felt in his body was also significantly alleviated. The more progress he made in the Wingform Ascension arts, the higher the regard that he held it in, particularly in this environment, where flight was impossible. However, he only had one profound point left, so he had to earn some more. Right at this moment, the badge that was sitting on his badge suddenly began to glow and buzz. Han Li picked up the badge to find that a line of small text had appeared upon it. A pleased smile appeared on his face upon seeing this, and he made his way out of his room. At this moment, there were around a dozen gladiators gathered in the 9th area, and all of them turned to look at Han Li with peculiar expressions. Han Li paid no heed to them as he made his way out of the lobby to arrive in the exchange hall, then continued down another passageway without pause. Inside the passageway was a staircase that led downward, and upon arriving at the foot of the staircase, Han Li found himself in another hall that was similar in size to the exchange hall above, but this place was rather dimly lit. At the front of the hall was a giant stone gate that was tightly shut, and at this moment, there was no one else in the hall with the exception of a man with a single horn on his head. "You're Li Feiyu," the horned man asked with a hint of surprise in his eyes. "That's right," Han Li replied. "You're here right on time. You have a battle coming up soon," the horned man said, then strode over to the stone gate before slapping it with the palm of his hand. A small opening that was only large enough to fit a single person appeared on the stone gate, and the horned man gestured for Han Li to wait, then stepped into the opening. "We have a truly exciting match lined up for everyone today. On one side, we have a tiger-scaled beast that's over 3,500 years old. This will be its 4th battle, and prior to this, it's already defeated 3 gladiators and devoured 2 of them on the spot," the horned man declared in an enthusiastic voice, and a chorus of excited cheers rang out from the spectator stands in response. At this moment, there were no battles taking place on the other 2 platforms, perhaps to highlight Han Li's first battle. On the other side, we have an extremely rare human gladiator from the Immortal realm, Li Feiyu, the horned man continued. The spectators in the stands instantly erupted into thunderous cheers upon hearing this. "A human gladiator. I can't even remember the last time I saw one. This really is a rare treat. If I recall correctly, the last human gladiator that showed up was over 1,000 years ago, and he was torn to shreds. Humans are just too weak. The horned man was very pleased to see the reaction garnered by Han Li, and he declared, "The battle between the tiger-scaled beast and Li Feiyu is about to commence soon, so place your bets now, and no further bets will be taken once the battle begins." The initial odds for the battle between Han Li and the tiger-scaled beast were listed as 5-1. I'll put 100 profound coins on the tiger-scaled beast. I'll put 150 profound coins on the tiger-scaled beast. I'll put 300 profound coins on the tiger-scaled beast. You only have 300 profound coins left. Are you going to bet it all on one battle? Before I was cast into exile here, one of my good friends was killed by a human cultivator from the Immortal realm, so I have to bet everything I have against this human bastard in honor of my friend. Han Li's identity as a human cultivator had completely riled up the crowd, and not only were there far more bets being placed than on average, most of them were against Han Li. As more and more bets were placed, the odds gradually shifted from 5-1 to 12-1, which meant that if someone bet on Han Li and he came out on top, then their winnings would be 12 times their initial bet, whereas the winnings for a successful bet on the tiger-scaled beast would only be 1/12 of the initial bet. Even so, the vast majority of bets were still placed on the tiger-scaled beast. After all, this was essentially free money. "Time's up! Let the battle begin!" the horned man roared, and the stone gate that separated the arena from the hall that Han Li was in was slowly lifted. The commotion ringing out within the arena instantly crescendoed to a peak, and the excitement in the air was almost palpable as Han Li was revealed. Han Li slowly rose to his feet, then made his way into the massive arena. As he did so, his head was slightly lowered, and he was carefully examining the ground, which was riddled with dark red stains from all of the blood that had seeped into it over the years. "That's the human. He looks way too frail. What a snooze fest. He won't even be able to withstand a single attack from the scaled beast. And he's not even equipped with any armor or weapons. Is he asking to be killed? What's the point in a battle like this? It's nothing more than a gimmick. No wonder the odds are so skewed." On the spectator stands, a muscular green-skinned man was pointing at a horned man sitting beside him as he chortled with derision. "You're betting on that human to win. You must be crazy. If he actually wins, I'll kneel down and call you my father." "Anything's possible. There could always be a miracle," the horned man protested. But it was clear that he wasn't very confident at all. He had bet on the human after being drawn in by the alluring odds, but as soon as he caught sight of Han Li, his heart was filled with despair. "A miracle? How can you still be so naive after staying in this godforsaken place for so long?" the green-skinned man chortled with mirth. The horned man offered no response as a grim look appeared on his face. In his mind, it was already beyond a shadow of a doubt that the human was going to lose. A wave of boos instantly rang out across the spectator stands, and no one believed that this frail-looking human would be able to oppose a fearsome 3,500-year-old scaled beast. At this point, the only thing that they had to look forward to was seeing the human being torn to shreds.